Subcommittee on Energy to order, and the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. And welcome to today's hearing, Strengthening American Energy, Review of Pipeline Safety Policy. And I want to thank our witnesses for participating today. We will examine the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's PHMSA Pipeline Safety Program. PHMSA is a Department of Transportation agency tasked with developing and enforcing federal safety regulations for the nation's onshore pipeline infrastructure and the transportation of hazardous materials. The witnesses before us represent different segments of PHMSA regulated community and can provide important perspectives on the reauthorization of PHMSA. Pipelines are the safest and most efficient mode of transportation for oil, natural gas, liquid energy products, and hazardous materials, and they play an instrumental role in delivering the products that drive our nation's economy forward. The agency has about 3.3 million miles of pipelines under its purview. In order to ensure these pipelines are operated in a safe and reliable manner, PHMSA partners and coordinates with states to administer pipeline safety programs and inspect infrastructure within a state's boundaries. PHMSA was last authorized in protecting our infrastructure of pipelines and Enhancing Safety Act, the PIPES Act of 2020, through fiscal year 2023. It is my belief that we can work in a bipartisan fashion in this Congress with our House and Senate colleagues to reauthorize PHMSA to continue carrying out its mission and associated duties. This subcommittee has a responsibility to ensure PHMSA maintains a strong focus on safety and operates within its statutory authorities. The PIPES Act of 2020 included several statutorily mandated rulemakings that never fully got out of the gate under the previous administration. Today, the subcommittee will examine implementation of the PIPES Act to ensure that PHMSA is on track to carry out congressional intent in a cost-effective and workable manner. Additionally, the subcommittee will examine new challenges and opportunities for pipeline safety. For example, the replacement of aging infrastructure must be a top priority for PHMSA, states, and pipeline operators, but it presents cost and operational challenges, especially as energy demand is projected to increase significantly in the immediate future. The upgrading of our natural gas network must be prioritized to ensure the safe transportation of natural gas and other important energy sources and products. While substantial progress has been made in replacing aging pipes, there is still work to be done. I look forward to the hearing from our witnesses on how PHMSA can help address the remaining 1% of the iron distribution pipes. American innovations and net technologies like artificial intelligence technology also present opportunities to bolster the quality of risk assessments and advance safety towards our collective goal of zero incidents. However, these technologies will also pose challenges to information and operational security. It is important that PHMSA reauthorization gives the agencies the tools needed to have an effective approach for the opportunities and challenges ahead. In his confirmation hearing last week, Paul Roberti, President Trump's nominee for PHMSA administrator, committed to pursuing opportunities to utilize new, cost-effective technology to enhance safety. The subcommittee hopes to collaborate with PHMSA and pipeline operators in this endeavor. As we look at the reauthorization, that must prioritize the improvements to the agency's core responsibility, which is safety. I'm concerned that the previous administration advanced extraneous priorities and set safety out to the side. However, President Trump's administration is recommitted to this critical mission. I believe this committee can produce a reauthorization that maintains safety as a cornerstone of pipeline safety program. Pipelines are imperative to public safety and the energy security of our nation. I look forward to hearing from the pipeline operators today as we build on American energy leadership. And I want to thank again our witnesses for being here today, and I yield back. And at this time, recognize the gentlelady from the 14th District of Florida, who is the ranking member of the subcommittee for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's hearing is an important reminder of the role of this committee of ensuring the safety of the public and our energy infrastructure. Congress created the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration in 2004, And we charged it with ensuring the safety of nearly 3.3 million miles of pipelines across the country. Now, pipelines can be dangerous. There are many hundreds of pipeline safety incidents every year, many that result in death and injury. That's why PHMSA's work in setting safety standards and inspecting interstate pipelines is critical. And for years, Democrats have been focused on ensuring that PHMSA has adequate resources and a strong professional workforce. After a number of deadly accidents and the growing magnitude of aged, leaky, and unsafe pipelines, Congress passed the Pipes Act of 2020 to improve the safety of gas gathering lines and pipelines, while also addressing wasteful and dangerous methane gas leakages. Congress followed on in 2021 in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and allocated $1 billion over 5 years for natural gas distribution infrastructure safety and modernization grants to help replace leak-prone pipelines. I noticed in your opening, Mr. Chairman, you said the Trump administration is recommitted to safety. Oh, no. To the contrary, the Trump administration has halted those safety and modernization grants earlier this year, but multiple lawsuits were filed by states, nonprofits, and local communities challenging the freeze. And on April 17th, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to reinstate funding, ruling that the freeze was arbitrary and capricious and violated the law. The Department of Energy and EPA were required to resume disbursement of already awarded safety grant funds. The Trump administration also is failing to follow through on other pipeline safety initiatives, even though the Congress has been clear that we expect PHMSA to conduct robust reviews of pipeline maintenance and operation plans. When Congress reauthorized PHMSA's Office of Pipeline Safety in the Bipartisan Pipes Act, we require PHMSA to consider protection of the environment when reviewing proposed safety rules, including methane pollution leak detection. The former administration completed a final leak detection rule, but President Trump arbitrarily demanded that PHMSA withdraw it. That's not smart. Climate risk, cost, and harms are growing in severity, and PHMSA's work is only becoming more important. Climate-fueled extreme weather events can cause pipeline leaks and explosions, especially in high-risk states like Texas and Louisiana. We must ensure that all impacts are considered in siting, design, repair, and maintenance of oil and gas infrastructure, including pipelines. Unfortunately, rather than follow the law mandated by Congress, the Trump administration's PHMSA is taking a laissez-faire approach to pipeline safety, and this is dangerous and costly. To add insult to injury, the Trump administration has gutted PHMSA over the past 7 months. Enforcement actions by the agency are at record lows, just 5 cases in the first 3 months of this year, compared to 66 cases during the same time period in 2017. And get this, more than half of the agency's senior leadership has left. We're seeing this kind of sabotage over and over again from the Trump administration, and it's really putting Americans at risk. For example, my neighbors back home in Florida are less safe this hurricane season because of cuts at the National Weather Service. They've ended vital satellite forecasting initiatives and have left offices understaffed. At FERC, the president has asked the existing chair, who he appointed the first time around, to resign early, and then nominated a new chair who doesn't have any energy background. These actions jeopardize FERC's independence and make our energy systems less safe. At the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, President Trump has fired a safety commissioner and pushed executives' orders that threaten NRC independence. And just last week, Trump fired nearly every member of the U.S. Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board. So at every opportunity that Trump is cutting corners with safety and undermining agency independence. And folks, this is not normal. And I urge my Republican colleagues on this committee to stand up to this reckless gutting of independent agency experts and abdication of the laws that keep us safe. Americans want safe and affordable energy. But we know we're going to be grappling with the higher cost of the big, ugly bill. I hope we can talk a little bit about that today. Mr. Chairman, hope springs eternal Nevertheless, this could be the start of a good bipartisan dialogue to reauthorize pipeline safety and address some of the issues in this committee. So thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the chair of the full committee, the gentleman from Kentucky's 2nd District, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Latta, and thank to our witnesses for being here today. We appreciate it. Pipelines are critical to the safe transportation and distribution of oil, natural gas, and other energy products, along with hazardous liquid products. As demand for energy is projected to skyrocket over the next decade, we must ensure our nation's pipeline safety laws are ready to meet the moment. The Energy and Commerce Committee plays an important role in the reauthorizing of Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's PHMSA's Pipeline Safety Program. Under the new leadership of Chair Latta and myself, I hope we can work in a bipartisan manner. As my friend from Florida said, we will work to do that in this effort. PHMSA oversees the U.S. energy pipeline network of over 3.3 million miles of onshore pipelines. To accomplish this task, PHMSA partners with states to ensure the entire network is safely operated and maintained. According to a 2019 PHMSA report, pipelines delivered 180 million gallons of energy per safety incident, while trucks delivered only 55 million gallons of safety incident, and trains only 50. Over the last 20 years, serious pipeline incidents have been reduced by approximately 34%. To continue this downward trend, PHMSA must operate within its statutory authority and maintain its focus on public safety. Unfortunately, under the previous administration, PHMSA strayed from this core responsibility, focusing more on environmental agendas than safety. The current PHMSA has a busy docket, promulgating and finalizing statutory mandated regulations, updating regulations that are decades old, and refocusing the agency on its essential mission. Today's hearing will provide an important foundation. As the committee examines the status of outstanding rulemakings from the Pipes Act of 2020, ways to close penalty loopholes for pipeline vandalism, opportunities to streamline processes, and the role emerging technologies can play in mitigating risk and increasing efficiencies across the pipeline system. I believe a major consideration for the future of pipeline safety is ensuring adequate capacity is available. As operators work to replace aging infrastructure, we must have capacity available to take pipelines temporarily offline for upgrades and repairs while still meeting the needs of American consumers. Pipelines are essential to the energy security of our country. I look forward to working with Chair Latta and Ranking Members Pallone and Castor to strengthen our nation's pipeline network. And thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and seeing if the ranking member of the full committee is here. Okay. Well, at this time, what we'll do, we'll informally pass on the ranker's opening statement and go right to our witnesses today. But this concludes the member opening statements, and the chair reminds members that pursuant to the committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. We want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and taking the time to testify before the subcommittee. Each witness will have the opportunity to give an opening statement, followed by a round of questions from the members. Our witnesses for today are, pardon me, Mr. Andrew Black, the President and CEO at the Liquid Energy Pipeline Association, Ms. Sarah Miller, President and CEO at GPA Midstream, Mr. Bill Karam, the Executive Director of Pipeline Safety Trust, and Mr. Jim Moriarty, the Executive Vice President and General Counsel at the Chesapeake Utilities Corporation. And again, as I mentioned, the chair appreciates all of our witnesses appearing before us today, and you'll each be given 5 minutes for an opening statement. And just a quick update on our mics here that you have to pull them up close so they can hear you. Press the button, and hopefully you'll see a little light come on. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to see. Oh, and you know what? Before we do, since we informally passed on the ranker, we'll hear from the ranker first and then go right to the witnesses. So the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I came right up from the other hearing, but I guess they're all happening too quickly. Let me see what I have here. It's been 661 days since the last pipeline safety reauthorization expired, so I'm glad we're here today because there's a lot to talk about. Pipeline safety risks are just as prevalent as ever, but since President Trump took office, enforcement action against pipeline operators by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or FISMA, have fallen off a cliff. In fact, it's been so long since we've had a hearing, I haven't used the word PHMSA much. It's not because pipelines have somehow magically gotten safer since January 20th, but instead it's because the Trump administration is once again prioritizing profits for their favorite industries over the safety of the American people. And that's why Trump's forcing out the public servants that help to keep our pipelines safe is so wrong. Nearly all of PHMSA's top staff have left the agency, and dozens of employees have either been forced out or been paid to leave. And the Trump administration is simply letting the agency bleed out talent that was vital to keeping Americans safe. And the Trump administration isn't just haphazardly enforcing law at FISMA. Sometimes it's not following the law at all. The last reauthorization signed by President Trump required that PHMSA issue a final rule improving leak detection in gas pipelines. PHMSA finalized that rule in January in the final days of the Biden administration, but the Trump administration clawed it back from the printer before it could even be published. It did the same thing with a proposed rule on the safety for carbon dioxide pipelines, which was required by pipeline safety legislation over a decade ago. So PHMSA has even ignored basic transparency requirements that it publish monthly updates on its progress on finalizing rules and regulations required by law. All of this is clear that the Trump administration has no interest in following the law. And that's why it's so important that this committee work together on pipeline safety reauthorization, not just across the aisle here, but with our colleagues on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee. We must ensure pipelines are safe and that the administration and pipeline operators are following the law. If Republicans want to pass a pipeline safety reauthorization package this Congress, I would urge them not to follow the process that committee Republicans used last Congress. Committee Republicans insisted on the legislative hearing and markup on a partisan bill that cut PHMSA's authorized funding levels by nearly 20% and had several poison pill provisions completely unrelated to safety. They also refused to engage with the Transportation Committee on compromise legislation and, as a result, never even moved a bill to the floor. In short, Republicans should not follow that same playbook. As we look to reauthorize the pipeline safety program, it's important that we focus on safety. Committee Republicans should not try to gut bipartisan programs we established in our last bill. It's also critical that we give PHMSA the resources and tools we know it needs to keep us all safe. So finally, because this is our first Energy Subcommittee hearing since Republicans passed a big, ugly bill, I wanted to briefly talk about the harm that bill will cause American families. We heard testimony from countless Republican witnesses throughout the first half of this year, begging Republicans not to cut vital tax incentives for clean energy or energy affordability programs from the Inflation Reduction Act. They also pleaded with Republicans to stay away from cutting the efforts by the Loan Program Office to keep our energy competitive, especially looking at nuclear power. And Republicans ignored all these experts' pleas, and now as a result, power bills for American families will rise by up to $400 per year, reliability will be undermined, the risk of blackouts will go up, and the climate crisis will get worse. So Republicans' dangerous energy agenda is basically pickpocketing working families to give handouts to the rich, including the big oil and gas corporations who are among the only ones that stand to benefit from it. And I just wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, this pipeline safety issue is very important to me. We had an incident many years ago when I was in Congress where we had a major explosion in our district. Certainly in New Jersey, we're all very concerned about pipeline safety. And and so I just think that, ignoring all this and just cutting all the people and getting rid of all the people that work there is just a terrible thing. I don't understand why pipeline safety can't be bipartisan. It always was in the past. Maybe I'm old-fashioned and, nothing's bipartisan anymore. But the bottom line is this really should be. I mean, people care about it, and we should care about it as well. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. And at this time, again, we'll go back to our witnesses. And as I mentioned, just pull the mic up close, press that button, and you'll see at When you hit the 4-minute mark, it'll go yellow with the lights up front, which means you have a minute to conclude your statement, and the red is at 5 minutes. So with that, Mr. Black, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. Ranking Member, I'm Andy Black, President and CEO of the Liquid Energy Pipeline Association. We have over 50 member companies delivering over 20 billion barrels annually across a nearly 230,000-mile network of pipelines. America is blessed with abundant energy supplies. Expanding American energy production will send new supply to market and pressure prices downward. The Energy and Commerce Committee has an important role in ensuring our pipeline network is safe, allowing us to confidently expand our energy infrastructure. Liquid energy pipelines deliver transportation fuels like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that families, commuters, businesses, and travelers use to drive and fly where they need to go. Pipelines deliver feedstocks like crude oil, ethane, and butane to make everything from plastics to pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, paints, fabrics, and fuels. Rural, home, and agricultural fuels like propane delivered by pipeline before traveling locally by truck heat rural homes and farms, dry crops after harvest, and keep livestock barns warm throughout the winter. As this committee considers the role of pipeline infrastructure and what changes to make to federal pipeline safety laws, it's important to remember that pipelines are the safest way to deliver energy. More than 99.999% of crude oil and petroleum products delivered by pipeline reaches its destination safely. A report prepared for Congress by PHMSA found that pipelines were 13 times safer than both trains and trucks. Current pipeline incident statistics also show pipeline safety is improving further. According to publicly available PHMSA data, total liquid pipeline incidents are down 13% over the last 5 years. Incidents impacting people and the environment are also down 13% over the last 5 years. And when comparing incidents to volume delivered, the decrease is even more striking, with liquid pipeline incidents per barrel delivered down 33% over those 5 years. These safety metrics are available in the Pipeline Performance Report and Pipeline Excellence Strategic Plan. In this report, you can see how the liquid pipeline industry is addressing key challenges like corrosion, leak detection, and geohazards. You can see how operators are improving pipeline safety by harnessing new technologies, artificial intelligence, safety management systems, and recommended practices. Declining pipeline incidents over the last 5 years supports a measured approach to reauthorizing pipeline safety laws without major changes or mandates. LIPA does believe there's a role for Congress to encourage PHMSA to leverage technology for pipeline safety, support American energy development through safe pipelines, and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of PHMSA programs. Congress can do more to modernize pipeline safety programs. Key parts of PHMSA's safety regulations are over 20 years old and do not reflect the latest advances in safety technology or know-how. High-tech analytic tools like an MRI or an ultrasound you find in the doctor's office are available for pipeline safety. Analytic methods like machine learning and artificial intelligence can help operators digest data to show when a pipeline might be leaking or when it might need maintenance. This administration is off to a good start, providing long-needed reforms to PHMSA. PHMSA has announced changes that will improve transparency and issued several notices on important proposals. PHMSA announced regulatory actions to improve special permits, update incident reporting thresholds, and integrate remote sensing technologies for monitoring rights-of-way patrols. LIPA believes Congress can make some of these reforms permanent and provide the agency additional personnel with STEM expertise and pipeline operations experience. 6 of the specific pipeline safety reauthorizations provisions LIPA would welcome include reform PHMSA special permanent program permanently to impose decision deadlines and limit unrelated requirements, strengthen penalties for pipeline safety violations that impair operational facilities or damage construction sites, fulfill the 2020 congressional mandate of a safety program for idled pipelines, reauthorize without extraneous conditions a PHMSA technology demonstration pilot program, authorize a voluntary information sharing program to convene stakeholders to collaborate on safety initiatives similar to FAA's successful program, and authorize risk-based inspections of in-service breakout tanks to reduce unnecessary greenhouse and air pollutant emissions, worker safety threats, and hazardous waste. More recommendations are listed in my written testimony. Thank you again for the committee's support of pipeline energy infrastructure and the opportunity to testify before you today on the benefits of pipelines, including their safety. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And Ms. Miller, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Castor, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of GPA Midstream Association. My name is Sarah Miller, and I serve as the President and CEO of GPA Midstream, an organization that has represented the U.S. midstream energy sector since 1921. Safety of employees, contractors, and communities is the highest priority for GPA Midstream member companies. Our nearly 50 corporate members are responsible for the safe and efficient gathering, processing, transporting, and marketing of natural gas liquids, crude oil, and refined products. Our members directly employ over 57,000 individuals and indirectly support more than 600,000 jobs across the U.S. economy. In 2023, GPA Midstream members contributed over $206 billion in economic impact, operating more than 506,000 miles of pipeline and over 365 natural gas processing facilities. Our members are an invisible link between raw natural gas and crude oil produced at the wellhead and distribution of products to consumers for heating, electricity production, transportation, steel making, fertilizer production, plastics, high-tech devices, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and much more. The U.S. Energy Information Administration projects that U.S. production and consumption of natural gas and petroleum, which includes NGLs, will remain strong through at least 2050. Similarly, Rice University's Baker Institute projects natural gas and crude will sustain a steady share of the global energy mix also through 2050. That is to say that it remains essential to continue our focus on pipeline safety for existing and new pipeline infrastructure to assure we can meet energy demands in the U.S. and around the world. GPA Midstream members support reauthorization of PHMSA's pipeline safety programs with the goal to ensure pipelines remain the safest method for transporting affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy, while also facilitating innovation and efficiency. We seek legislative and regulatory predictability and certainty to enable prudent investment decisions for the benefit of communities and investors alike. Our members advocate many goals for the reauthorization of PHMSA's pipeline safety program, including several reflected in this committee's bill from the last congressional session. Specifically, our members appreciate improved due process enforcement in enforcement matters, reform of the special permit program, strengthening penalties for those who damage infrastructure, and the recognition of opportunity for innovation and alternative technologies. Today, I offer 3 recommendations especially meaningful to our members. First, we urge elimination of duplicative oversight of in-plant gas piping. Hazardous liquid implant piping is exempt by law from PHMSA's regulation, but the regulation of gas implant piping is not. Implant piping is within the jurisdiction of other robust safety programs, such as OSHA's process management standards. Aligning the treatment of gas and liquid implant piping would eliminate regulatory redundancy without compromising safety. We are grateful to PHMSA for recognizing such redundancy and issuing a notice to propose rulemaking to codify an exception for implant piping systems into the gas pipeline safety regulations. We also seek legislative certainty for the elimination of such redundancy. Second, in recent years, there have been more rulemakings aimed at gathering pipelines. The physical and commercial operations of gathering pipelines can differ greatly from transmission pipelines. Therefore, we request the Gas Pipeline Advisory Committee facilitate greater input from gathering pipeline operators for more effective gathering pipeline safety regulations. Third, we encourage the use of more performance-based measures and less prescriptive regulations to achieve safety goals. Performance-based measures consider relevant operating conditions and assess risks to achieve meaningful safety priorities. Performance-based measures will also facilitate a longer-term reauthorization period for PHMSA's programs as they allow for evolving technological advancement and best practices proven by time and experience to achieve safety. In conclusion, GPA Midstream is committed to working with Congress and PHMSA to ensure the continued safety and reliability of our nation's energy infrastructure. We appreciate your leadership on this important issue and stand ready to serve as a resource as you move forward with reauthorization. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your opening statement. Mr. Karam, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair, Ranking Member, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Bill Karam, Executive Director of the Pipeline Safety Trust, which was created after the 1999 Olympic pipeline tragedy in Bellingham, Washington, that killed 3 boys. We serve as an independent national watchdog over the pipeline industry and its regulators. On average, a significant pipeline incident occurs every 32 hours in America, nearly 1 every day. Since this subcommittee's last pipeline safety hearing last year in January 2024, 18 people have been killed and 45 hospitalized from pipeline incidents. The past 2 years have been the deadliest in nearly 15 years, with 30 deaths, including a 5-year-old in Missouri, a 15-year-old in Utah, and an 82-year-old pastor's wife in Mississippi. Our shared goal of 0 incidents feels unreachable when we haven't yet been able to prevent these tragic deaths. Looking at pipeline safety metrics over the last 10 years or longer doesn't show that we're making progress. The number of significant incidents each year remains frustratingly flat. Other metrics, such as incidents impacting people or the environment, display a slight downward trend, so slight that statisticians would say it could easily be due to chance rather than actual improvement. And while we did make meaningful progress on fatalities in the previous decade, the last decade shows a slight upward trend, though like other metrics, not statistically significant. Pipeline failures don't just kill and injure people and damage ecological areas. They cost billions and disrupt energy supplies. Over the last 10 years, pipeline incidents have been reported by operators to cost over $6 billion. Incidents on pipelines such as Colonial's refined products pipeline that supplies the East Coast with 45% of its liquid energy have put critical energy reliability at risk. But the same solutions that save lives and protect our environment also strengthen our economy and energy security. Making a meaningful difference on pipeline safety will require 3 elements: improved regulations, effective enforcement, and widespread adoption of pipeline safety management systems, or PSMS. In many cases, Congress has hamstrung PHMSA from developing effective regulations. Provisions in the pipeline safety statute, like the extra burdensome cost-benefit requirement and the non-application clause, make it extremely difficult for PHMSA to develop life-saving regulations. Despite these limitations, there are ways to make a meaningful difference on pipeline safety. For example, as recently recommended by the NTSB, natural gas alarms or methane detectors would undoubtedly save lives. Incidents in Japan have declined by 90% alongside the adoption of these alarms. Another idea is fire shutoff valves. These simple devices automatically close when exposed to heat, preventing gas from fueling house fires. They're inexpensive, maintenance-free, and easily installed. We need modernized regulations for carbon dioxide and hydrogen-blended pipelines. Congress has incentivized this infrastructure without addressing the regulatory and research gaps that put communities on the front lines of significant safety risks. This year marks 5 years since the Denbury carbon dioxide pipeline failure in Satartia, Mississippi, that sent nearly 50 people to the hospital. That harrowing night laid bare many of the risks and regulatory shortfalls with these pipelines. Increasing authorized resources to PHMSA is also necessary. Not only has the agency been chronically underfunded, but the additional miles of jurisdictional pipe and the potential build-out of carbon dioxide and hydrogen pipelines demands an increase in resources from Congress, both to the agency and just as significantly to the state programs. But even the best regulations are meaningless without robust enforcement. Recently, enforcement case initiations have declined drastically, down nearly 65% compared to this point in the first Trump administration. According to a recent PHMSA report to Congress on the adoption of PSMS, or Pipeline Safety Management Systems, among gas distribution operators, while most pipeline mileage is owned by operators committed to PSMS, only half of all operators have made this commitment. To improve safety, we need industry-wide adoption, all systems, all operators, large and small. As you discuss how to move forward on authorizing PHMSA's pipeline safety program and make improvements to the law, I implore you to think of the empty seats at dinner tables across the country because of pipeline failures. 18 dinner tables are missing someone just since last year's pipeline safety hearing alone. Please ensure PHMSA meets its responsibility to the American people. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your opening statement. And Mr. Moriarty, you are recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Castor, and members of the subcommittee. I am Jim Moriarty, Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Chesapeake Utilities Corporation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear today. We are a diversified energy delivery company headquartered in Delaware, with service offerings that include natural gas gathering, transmission, and distribution, as well as propane, mobile compressed natural gas services, and electricity generation and distribution. Our company has operated for more than 160 years and today owns and operates assets in 9 states, serving over 440,000 customers with over 1,200 dedicated employees. Natural gas infrastructure plays an integral role in the national security and economic sovereignty of our country, and the demand for this domestic resource will only increase in the coming years. As a key part of this nation's pipeline infrastructure, our subsidiaries distribute natural gas to more than 330,000 customers through over 9,000 miles of pipeline. We also operate over 700 miles of transmission pipelines, a liquefied natural gas storage facility, and a renewable gas transportation fleet. Across the country, varying local and state mandates have created a complex and patchwork regulatory landscape that complicates planning, increases cost, and ultimately affects consumer choice and pipeline safety. A unified federal approach, modeled after laws already enacted in 27 states that protect a customer's right to choose natural gas as their primary energy source, would provide clarity, prevent regulatory fragmentation, and ensure that safe, reliable, and affordable domestic energy remains accessible to all Americans. Natural gas utility distribution pipelines are the final critical link in the delivery chain as we engage daily with American families, communities, and businesses, as well as state authorities who oversee pipeline safety today. We strive to make life better for the communities in which we live and serve. Accordingly, pipeline safety is and must be our #1 priority. For these reasons, we are focused on continually enhancing our culture of operational safety and risk mitigation. Every year, our company, like many others, invests in our pipeline systems, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to enhance safety, reliability, and accessibility. For example, our distribution system has been modernized by eliminating cast iron and bare steel. Across our service areas, we are performing advanced leak detection and incorporating a variety of new and innovative technologies to consistently prevent safety incidents. Chesapeake Utilities and other natural gas distribution companies support the following principles in the upcoming pipeline safety reauthorization legislation. First, streamline processes to meet energy demands on schedule by ensuring policies reflect the growing need for natural gas and the critical role that pipeline infrastructure plays. 2, limit safety incidents, property damage, and environmental impacts caused by unintended excavation damages. 3, strengthen criminal penalties on those who sabotage or intentionally damage pipeline facilities. 4, identify emerging technologies that improve safety. 5, study safe operations for natural gas and hydrogen blending in distribution systems. And 6, establish a 5-year reauthorization period so that PHMSA and the industry have sufficient time to complete and assess improvements. Our industry has proved we can expand natural gas delivery while also improving safety. Doing so enables us to continue to meet the needs of our customers and the communities that we proudly serve by delivering safe, affordable, and reliable domestic energy so that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your opening statement, and that will conclude our opening statements from our witnesses. And again, I want to thank you all for being with us today. And at this time, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes to our questions to our witnesses. Ms. Miller, do you believe that PHMSA's primary mission as a regulator should be safety?
I do.
And would you explain why pipelines have a net positive effect on the environment?
Well, as you've heard from other witnesses, and first I should say thank you, Chairman, for the question, but as you've heard from other witnesses as well, pipelines are the cleanest and safest way to move energy. The demand for affordable, reliable, and safe, sustainable energy sources is growing, and natural gas is abundant in the United States. So with appropriate regulatory policy, natural gas can, and the pipelines that the midstream operators design, install, and operate can be the way that safe, affordable, reliable energy is delivered to the communities that need it. I would note that the U.S. Energy Information Administration has reported that natural gas results in fewer emissions than using coal or petroleum products to deliver the same energy. Therefore, when you use natural gas through pipelines in place of coal or other petroleum products, you're actually enabling communities worldwide to have reliable, affordable energy sources to enable a higher quality standard of living safely. And our members, on top of all that, our members are prioritizing safety, and they're looking for ways to ensure that their pipelines do not have leaks. Emitted gas, lost gas is actually lost profit, lost value for our members, so they are not only incentivized to ensure that natural gas pipelines are operated safely, but they also deliver an environmental benefit because it's the right thing to do, but also because they're financially incentivized to ensure that that product stays in the pipe.
Well, thank you. Mr. Moriarty, 40% of electric generation in the United States comes from natural gas. Electricity demand in the United States is projected to increase more than 25% in the next 5 years, in part because of the race for AI and the onshoring of manufacturing. That means we're going to need more natural gas, which will require significant infrastructure build-out, including the expansion of pipeline infrastructure. Could you elaborate on how pipeline constraints impact and ultimately jeopardize safety?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. States that allow prompt regulatory recovery of the costs for the replacement and relocation of pipelines will accelerate the upgrading of aging infrastructure. We have these regulatory mechanisms in Florida and in Maryland and Delaware. Also, excavation damage is the primary source of distribution pipeline incidents and hampers operations and efforts to upgrade aging infrastructure. States that have strong excavation damage prevention programs and enforcement typically experience lower rates of damage to distribution pipelines.
Well, thank you. Mr. Black, the Pipes Act of 2020 recognized the value of using new technologies to bolster both efficiency and safety. However, DOE's implementation of the program had many non-statutory requirements that ultimately deterred participation. Would you elaborate on what some of those non-statutory hurdles were and are?
Thank you for your leadership on this issue in the 2020 Pipes Act and in last Congress's bill, and we hope that we can continue to work on this issue. The technology demonstration pilot program gives us an opportunity to demonstrate how new technologies can improve pipeline safety. PHMSA went beyond the safeguards that Congress suggested and required technology pilot program applicants to use a special permit process and to put those before a NEPA review, none of which had ever been done for similar types of applications like that. So nobody used it.
Just, pardon for interrupting, why would they do that? They've never done it before.
It confounded us. I don't know.
But, you know, there's another kind of a theme that went through. Why aren't we prosecuting these cases? Because obviously we need higher penalties for, you know, tax on pipelines. What's happening out there? If I got 36 seconds left, but are we not prosecuting, or what's happening in these cases out there?
Well, there are criminal penalties in federal pipeline safety law for damaging or destroying pipelines, but we have incidents that don't lead to immediate damage or discovery that fall under loopholes. So we think you need to address issues like valve turning that can cause pressure buildups, or torching pipelines, or shooting high-powered rifles through pipelines, all of which have happened. We'd like to work with you to close those loopholes and deter attacks against pipelines.
Well, thank you very much, and my time has expired, and I now recognize the gentlelady from Florida, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Karam, you highlight the erosion of the commitment to pipeline safety in throughout your testimony, and that includes the professional workforce at PHMSA. Is that right?
Yes, we have heard of retirements at PHMSA.
And that, I understand that the Community Liaison Department, which engages members of the public, has gone from 13 employees to just 3 people who are now responsible for engaging the entire country. Can you explain to us what the real-world impacts of the reduction in professional expert workforce at PHMSA means for the safety of the public?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we don't know fully. We haven't heard official word out of PHMSA as exactly the extent of the retirements and the reductions in force. So we're going off of what's been reported in the media or what's available on their website, which hasn't been fully updated. But we have noticed that the Community Liaison Department went from, as you mentioned, 13 down to 3, and that includes the manager of the department. And that's 3 people in charge of, public engagement with members of the public across the entire country who live among and alongside the over 3 million miles of pipeline, more miles of pipeline than paved roads, which I hope is obvious is not nearly enough. And we've also heard, most of the leadership staff is gone. That's a lot of years of experience that has been drained out. We've also heard a lot of staff from the standards and rulemaking team has retired as well.
I'm also very concerned with the escalating costs and risk driven by the heating planet and climate change. In June, the National Transportation Safety Board issued a final report on the 1 million gallon pipeline oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2023, which caused $30 million in damage. In the report, the NTSB specified that it was the result of land movement related to hurricane activity. And this is fresh in my mind because I saw significant damage to energy infrastructure following Hurricanes Helene and Milton in the Tampa Bay area. Does PHMSA currently have any regulations or guidelines, Mr. Karam, for pipeline safety related to extreme weather events, flooding, and more intense hurricanes?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We call all of those geohazards, these geologic threats to pipeline integrity, and they can be a result of extreme weather events. And in addition to hurricanes, we've seen pipeline failures after large rainfall, of historic levels and things like that. There is nothing specific in PHMSA regulations about geohazards.
What can Congress do if we're going to update regulations to better incorporate climate resilience practices?
Mandate that PHMSA adopt geohazard-specific regulations. There's industry guidance out there. There's best practices by operators, and a lot to go on to start writing those regulations now.
There are also a few elephants in the room right now when it comes to pipeline safety, and one of them is the hatchet that the administration is taking to just basic funding of pipeline safety and PHMSA. Round your testimony out. What can we anticipate at PHMSA in regard to the safety of the public if these kind of the draconian cuts to work for professional experts and then their overall budget is enacted into law?
Well, PHMSA is already a under-resourced, understaffed agency before this, and it's really an all-hands-on-deck committed to safety. So it's really hard to imagine cuts not impacting their ability to be an effective safety regulator. These the types of results that we would expect to see from these cuts and lowering of enforcement and regulatory activity are, I would imagine, will be long-term. I don't think you'll see an overnight change, but if we were to see a change, unfortunately, I think it's long-term, and we'll be seeing it
And
for
the
years.
statistics that you highlighted early that say, well, maybe we really haven't seen a significant improvement in reduction in deaths and injuries. Is that likely to continue if we're not able to properly fund and support pipeline safety across America?
I hope that's not the case, but I do believe that a strong, effective regulator is what keeps pipelines, is part of what keeps pipelines safe, and lacking that, I worry about the results.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee for 5 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and sorry for popping up and down. We have another hearing going on downstairs. So Mr. Black, I'll first ask you this. How does PHMSA enforcement act as a deterrent to unsafe operations?
We are glad that this PHMSA has said that its top enforcement priority is pipeline safety, not other topics. And our country needs confidence in our pipeline network and in our pipeline safety oversight. Enforcement acts as a deterrent against unsafe operations, and so pipeline operators are expecting that PHMSA is enforcing pipeline safety rules for the betterment of safety.
Okay, because we need confidence, because I've had in my area, I know if you look at a map of pipelines, people would be just shocked how many pipelines we have. But whenever there's a new movement forward, there's always a big public relations campaign against a pipeline about safety. So we need confidence in it so people will know. And then you'll tell people, there are pipelines everywhere, and they don't realize that. But that's kind of become a new thing to keep us from moving energy around, is that people are pipelines. And we absolutely want them to be safe, and people have confidence in that. So thanks. So Ms. Miller, when PHMSA rulemakings go beyond the appropriate or statutory mandated scope, how does that impact an operator's ability to prioritize safety?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Guthrie. Operators will comply with PHMSA's regulations. And so when PHMSA's rules regulate matters other than to achieve safety priorities, that means that resources that alternatively could have been devoted to those safety priorities are spent in other ways. And this issue is not only relevant to the operators, but it's also relevant to PHMSA resources. We appreciate that Congress mandates PHMSA's scope of responsibility, and that the 2004 authorizing statute for PHMSA made clear that safety was to be its highest priority. And we welcome, to the extent that there's any ambiguity about that priority, that Congress can reaffirm PHMSA's focus on safety.
Thank you. Mr. Moriarty, what are the barriers to addressing the remaining distribution lines that need to be upgraded?
Thank you very much, Chairman Guthrie, for the question. In our view, pipeline infrastructure is the safest means for transporting energy, and more must be built to meet the growing demand. Just one example is our Ohio subsidiary worked very closely with AEP to build, it's called the Aspire Energy Express, to construct a new intrastate pipeline in central Ohio to support an on-site electric power generation at a new fuel facility center serving a data center. We continue to work on solutions to these problems. We work closely with our elected representatives and each of our regulatory agencies to address concerns. In our view, everybody is welcome to the table to raise any issues they have. But what we're asking for is just prompt, fair, and balanced consideration, and then issuance of regulations so that we all can comply with those.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Black, how can pipeline operators use AI and other technologies like smart pigs to improve safety throughout their operations?
We're really excited about
The smart pigs? Yeah. Explain a smart pig.
Might need the mic there.
There we go.
Explain a smart pig as well.
A smart pig is a pipeline inspection device that travels on the inside of a pipeline, pushed by the liquid product, collecting information, collects terabytes of data about the inside of a pipeline. So AI could be used to process that information to help identify more issues before they become problems. Similarly, pipeline operations have pumps, valves, and sensors along the long linear pipeline, and that creates operations data that AI and machine learning might help us find a pinhole leak that those sensors otherwise can't develop. And so support for R&D among the pipeline industry at places like the Pipeline Research Council International is happening right now by pipelines to try and benefit from AI. The way Congress can help is to reauthorize the Pipeline Safety Technology Demonstration Program that Chairman Latta asked me about that will help us test those technologies and show PHMSA how it should safely improve its regulations to benefit safety.
Miller, do you also agree that this AI or technology, if you find leaks that are otherwise too small to be detected, how would that improve safety?
Thank you. Yes, I would echo what Mr. Black just highlighted. Our members are using AI today to be able to sort through large quantities of data, to be able to identify trends and solve operational challenges. We believe that AI can inform risk assessment to help operators identify and manage first pipeline anomalies before they become leaks, and then also prioritize repairs in order to address those that pose the highest risk first. We would encourage.
My time's expired. He's about to gavel me down, so I'll thank you for your answer, and I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from New Jersey, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I am concerned about a number of actions the Trump administration has taken at PHMSA in its first 6 months. And one of those was clawing back a leak detection rule finalized in the last days of the Biden administration. And I want to be clear, the rule was finalized and done, but the Trump administration instructed the Federal Register not to publish the rule and has since clawed it back. So I just want to point out that some of our newer members that this rule was required by a bipartisan law that President Trump himself signed. That law required that PHMSA put forward a final rule within a year of enactment, and 4 years after the law was signed, President Trump prevented the rule from being finalized. So, Mr. Karam, could you talk about the importance of the leak detection rule? Did it have buy-in from industry and public stakeholders? Did the Trump administration's decision make us safer?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That rule was negotiated, discussed over 2 weeks of advisory committee meetings with multiple stakeholder groups, industry, public, and government. There were a lot of unanimous votes. Not all of the votes were unanimous, but many of them were. And I would say consensus was reached on the vast majority of the issues in leak detection and repair. That rule was due, as you said, a year after. That would have been in December of 2021, so it is years overdue now. So it was really disappointing to see it pulled back from being published.
And what about my question about did that decision by the Trump administration make us safer?
No. We continue to have incidents from known leaks. There are regulations on specifically what kind of equipment operators need to use, and the regulations around grading leaks as to how quickly they need to be repaired are vague, and that rule would have established those standards and I believe made pipelines safer.
Well, thank you. Now, I want to turn to a potential priority for a pipeline safety reauthorization bill. As you pointed out in your written testimony, PHMSA's safety rules are subject to a duplicative cost-benefit analysis over and beyond the one already required for all other federal rules. And this isn't a hypothetical problem. GPA Midstream, one of the witnesses represented here today, has used this at the D.C. Circuit Court to kill pipeline safety rules, and to me that's unacceptable. So, Mr. Karam, would you talk about how this duplicative requirement harms public safety and whether Congress should look at removing this requirement in a reauthorization bill?
As far as I'm aware, PHMSA is the only safety agency with this statutory cost-benefit requirement that is duplicative over the executive order. It's difficult to do cost-benefit on low-frequency, high-consequence failures like you see with pipelines, and it hamstrings PHMSA from making real progress on safety. As you mentioned, multiple rules over the last several years have been rolled back by the courts, saying that PHMSA didn't fully justify the costs with benefits, and the benefits in many of these cases are human lives.
Oh, thank you. I just want to mention to my Republican colleagues, because they keep talking about a bipartisan bill. But if we're really going to have a bipartisan bill on this issue, it has to be solely, and I stress solely, about increasing safety. The committee Republicans' pipeline safety bill failed last Congress because it was not drafted, in my opinion, in a collaborative manner and included partisan provisions related to pipeline siting as opposed to safety. So that's, it's not going to be bipartisan if it deals with siting and other issues other than safety. So I just hope we can see a more collaborative process this year, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the vice chair of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Black, I'm going to come back to you. I want to highlight a section of your written testimony addressing pipeline safety. Quote, a 2018 report prepared by PHMSA analyzing 10 years of incident data found pipelines were 13 times safer than both trains and trucks, with pipelines experiencing one incident for every 720 million gallons delivered, and rail incidents occurring every 50 million gallons delivered. Pipelines are the safest way to move this product. Agreed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you also talked about an Obama administration analysis found rejecting a major pipeline and shipping the same crude oil by rail would increase the risk of oil released by over 800 times and barrels released by 2.6 times. Very, very important information. The Keystone Pipeline would have come into my district, the Gulf Coast of Texas, over by Beaumont, Texas, Port Arthur to be exact. We know that we can move product cleanly. And nobody wants, and I think in one of the other witnesses' testimony, there was 18 or 30-something people killed in the last year, I think, if I recall that correctly. And that's so sad. Nobody wants that. Nobody is for that. I mean, everybody wants to do everything they can to prevent that. I mean, my gosh, we had a recent, weather event in Texas where over 300 people lost their lives. It's always sad. So I would say that we want, if you looked at the traffic records of last year, and this is, by the way, this is NHTSA's information. Last year in 2024, 39,000 people lost their lives in traffic. Everybody hates that. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to do as safe as they can, and that goes with pipelines. Would you agree?
Yes, Americans use liquid fuels every day, and if you cancel a pipeline, we're still going to use those fuels. They're going to move on to other modes that are less safe.
Right, and let me go back to the Keystone Pipeline. Keystone Pipeline coming into my district would have carried 830,000 barrels of product a day.
Yes.
If you divided that up into 18-wheelers, it's over 5,300 18-wheelers on the highway a day. What does that increase the chance of more and more people being killed on the highway? So nobody wants that. Obama shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Of course, President Trump got it back up and running, and then Biden shut it down too. So I'm going to go back to your report. You said pipeline incidents are down 13% over the last 5 years, and they remain the safest method to move product. And we are always striving to improve that record. How can Congress ensure that PHMSA is equipped to modernize its regulations in step with industry innovation without imposing restrictions that could hinder progress? How do we do that?
Well, several steps. One is to permanently reform the special permit program. As you know, there's so many different pipeline operating conditions and types of pipes. Sometimes PHMSA regulations are not one size fits all for that pipe. Second is to reauthorize without bureaucratic problems the pipeline safety technology demonstration program that we were talking other, and then to keep PHMSA focused on pipeline safety and to fund, have everybody working on R&D to get us down to 0 incidents.
It's safe to say, isn't it, in your opinion, that nobody who works in the pipeline industry, or in the fossil fuel industry for that matter, wants to go home from their job and find out that one of their relatives was killed on the highway. Nobody wants that. It's the same with pipeline safety. Everybody who works in the industry doesn't want anybody to be killed in that endeavor. Ms. Miller, I'm going to come to you. My district along the Gulf Coast has 3 LNG export facilities, a 4th across the board in Louisiana. So we understand, the understanding is that the PHMSA has been working to update regulations regarding the monitoring of LNG pipelines for corrosion, aligning them more closely with the risk-based industry driven standards. Some estimates suggest these updates could save facilities millions of dollars annually. With growing investment in LNG export capacity and increasing global demand for U.S. energy, how can common sense updates help safety regulations? Very quickly. Turn your mic on.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we do agree that performance-based or risk-based measures can help facilitate smarter safety regulation that actually achieves the outcomes that are desired. So we agree with you that performance-based measures facilitate safety.
And you would agree that nobody wants, nobody they know, no Americans, nobody killed on the highways and nobody killed by pipelines. You'd agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
Safety's first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing today. But I want to provide context for what's happening in Congress this week, what's happening outside the committee's doors. The Speaker has announced that we are going to have canceled votes this week. He is limiting the legislative action that can be taken on the floor, and I think most Americans would want to know why. Why would we limit the things that we can do to further the interests of our constituents? What would that issue be? And the issue that has broken the Republican Party is their refusal to vote on the release of the Epstein files. Of all the things that we have to deal with as a country, the reason we can't do our work here is because Republicans refuse to deal with the Epstein files and the transparency that they promised the American people. The Republican Party is so broken that they refuse to hold this administration accountable or let us do our jobs to vote on legislation. But we're sitting here pretending that it's business as usual in this hearing room this morning when we know that's not the case. Let me also remind folks back home that just last month, Republicans passed their highly partisan reconciliation package, which included provisions to bypass the Clean Water Act and erode states' rights to protect our constituents from polluting pipelines and a giveaway to fossil fuel companies. So the same time that they're making it easier for fossil fuel companies to build pipelines in states and districts that don't want them, they're making it harder for Americans to access health care through Medicaid, through the ACA, by adding additional red tape. So easier for fossil fuel companies, harder for average Americans who are potentially dealing with long-term disabilities. The absolute lack of accountability is astounding. Last year, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee put together and approved a truly bipartisan bill that would have reauthorized PHMSA pipeline safety programs for the next 4 years, giving families in all of our communities peace of mind that our pipelines are safe. Unfortunately, last year, instead of coming to the table, Energy and Commerce Republicans offered a bill that authorized significantly less than what we approved on T&I, to the tune of $80 million less per year. In fact, the Republican Energy and Commerce bill would have cut activities that keep our communities safe by 18% from the 2020 authorization levels. Mr. Karam, can you briefly touch on what a cut like this would mean for pipeline safety for all of our constituents?
Yes, thank you for that. Inflation, since the last pipeline authorization, the Pipes Act of 2020, inflation has been over 20%. So an increase of anything less than 20% in this reauthorization would be a cut in funding. On top of that, there's new jurisdiction for PHMSA and gathering lines and the potential build out of CO2 and hydrogen pipelines, all of which would require more funding. So a cut below the 2020 authorization would be quite drastic.
It would make it more difficult for hiring and retaining the experts that we need to coordinate critical elements of our pipeline safety programs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And with the ongoing layoffs and buyouts, we know that that's going to have an impact on pipeline safety programs. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what's happening there.
Yeah, because we now have even less staff and an already understaffed agency that is responsible for keeping all of our families safe from the dangers of neglected pipelines. Republicans are proposing to cut an already under-resourced agency, all while they're actively passing legislation and pushing for more pipelines. So less staff, less funding, and more work to do. It's highly concerning to me that the Trump administration is turning a blind eye to bad behavior by fossil fuel companies while they're actively hamstringing the agency responsible for holding these companies accountable and keeping us all safe, and Republicans in Congress are enabling it by cutting resources for PHMSA and adding to their workload. Would you say that the Republican approach to safety is making Americans less safe or more safe?
I would say cuts to PHMSA would make Americans less safe.
Correct. And we know that the TNI has a bill that would actually make a bipartisan bill that would provide the resources needed. But again, this committee, the Republicans on this committee, chose to go a different route and not act in a truly bipartisan way. This is all problematic because Democrats on this committee want to deal with the challenges that we have in this country, want to do in a thoughtful, bipartisan, bicameral way. We were able to do that on TNI, so it's not impossible. People think that we can't do these things in a bipartisan way. We absolutely can. TNI has shown us the way. This committee needs to follow TNI's lead to get those things done for the American people, to keep our constituents safe. I hope that's the work that we can do in this Congress, but apparently we won't be able to do it because Republicans refuse to release the Epstein files. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio's 12th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. My first question is for Ms. Miller. Thank you for being here. In your testimony, you state that in-plant piping regulation by PHMSA is duplicative to safety programs under the jurisdiction of OSHA. Can you elaborate on the requirements in-plant pipes must comply with under OSHA's process safety management standards?
Thank you for the question. We do appreciate this committee's consideration of the opportunity to bring legislative certainty to eliminating the duplication. So OSHA's pipeline safety management system does have requirements that include, for example, making sure that we have written operating procedures for covered processes, for maintaining integrity, for managing change. We would note that that PHMSA itself has acknowledged that the OSHA safety management imposed on gas in-plant piping is of a similar quality to what PHMSA itself would be requiring. And the duplication of that effort it's cumbersome. It brings not only duplicated demand for resources, but there can be inconsistencies. I would highlight, for example, one of the things is that we have inspectors from each of the agencies who are reviewing our operations. And when they do so, they come with different experience, different subject matter expertise. So the OSHA inspectors have familiarity with inspecting implants, for example, in refineries. The PHMSA inspectors have more experience inspecting interstate pipe transmission lines, for example. And so that the opportunity to have engage with a regulator who has more experience with implant piping brings more consistency and efficient use of resources that can be applied to other safety matters.
Thank you. Can you discuss the challenges your members have in ensuring safe operations when two different federal regulators are overseeing the same piping?
Thank you. I would repeat then that it is the complication of having two potentially inconsistent sets of requirements standing up two programs to be able to achieve similar safety desired outcomes, but through different means, with different types of inspections, different requirements, which is just a drain on resources and can be inconsistent or contradictory.
Would you say this conflict and regulatory overlap, like in the case of in-plant pipes, make it more confusing and challenging to maintain safe operations for GPA midstream members?
I would.
You also wrote in your testimony that PHMSA is rightfully taking action with the recent notice of proposed rulemaking. Tough position here, I can't say it. Proposed rulemaking to alleviate this regulatory uncertainty regarding in-plant gas piping. Would you agree that while the agency's proposal is welcome and necessary, Congress can and should still act to remedy this issue with a statutory fix to provide certainty for industry now and into the future?
Absolutely. Yes, the notice of proposed rulemaking from SUMSA is a great start, but we would appreciate Congress making that permanent. Our members appreciate legislative predictability and certainty so they can plan for long-term operations.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Black, and I want to be, I have a minute 23. Follow up with you. Last Congress, this committee passed a strong pipeline safety reauthorization that strengthened penalties on individuals that damage, destroy, or impair the operation of pipeline facilities. I've heard from a number of pipeline workers and operators in my district who have strong concerns about worker safety due to increase in attacks and vandalism on pipelines over the last several years. Mr. Black, can you discuss why it's so important for Congress to choose loopholes and strengthen penalties on individuals that attack pipelines? And follow up, would doing so help protect the safety and security of your members, employees, and pipeline workers?
Actions that tamper with the pipeline risk hurting the people who live nearby, the perpetrators themselves, and the environment. We've seen people cutting through chains to turn valves, shooting pipeline components before they are installed, and shooting using blowtorch on pipelines. Congress said no criminal penalties in the pipeline safety law for damaging or destroying, but there's a loophole. If you tamper with a pipeline but you don't immediately damage or destroy it, it's not covered by the federal pipeline safety laws. If you cover that, if you take that action to close that loophole, you will protect the environment and the workforce around those, and we would encourage you to do that in your reauthorization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Virginia's 4th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Castor, for holding this very important hearing. In recent years, we've seen several pipeline incidents in Virginia that underscore the importance of the pipeline safety program. Communities across the Commonwealth have long raised concerns about the Mountain Valley Pipeline, from construction activities contaminating drinking water to the risk of corroded pipes failing. These fears were sustained when in 2024, a section of the pipeline failed during hydro testing, a process that uses pressurized water to check pipe integrity. And in the summer of 2023, a TC Energy natural gas pipeline in Shenandoah Valley exploded, likely due to cracking in the pipe. In each of these cases, PHMSA has had critical responsibilities conducting testing during construction, investigating pipeline failures, and imposing corrective action. As this committee takes on reauthorization of the pipeline safety program, we must ensure that PHMSA has the personnel and resources it needs to carry out its vital responsibilities and keep our communities safe. So I'm glad that Ranking Member Castor asked questions on that point. The Mountain Valley Pipeline cuts through the Jefferson National Forest and crosses hundreds of waterways and wetlands. And since the start of the project, there have been around 1,500 reported pollution incidents impacting rivers, streams, and drinking water supply. During construction and testing of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, we heard that farmers and landowners were seeking more communication and engagement from PHMSA around the risks to their land and water resources, which I think is just as important a safety concern that we should all be worried about. So, Mr. Karam, I appreciate the Pipeline Safety Trust's work to make pipeline safety information more readily available and accessible to the public. And in addition to addressing the reckless workforce cuts that we have seen, how would you recommend that PHMSA improve its efforts to prevent pollution incidents and better engage community members?
Thank you for the question. I think it comes back to strong regulations and effective enforcement and pipeline safety management systems in order to limit these incidents. And really all three need to work together. There's lots of room for improvement on all three. And I hope the committee is looking to take that on. As far as community engagement, the Pipeline Safety Trust has really believed that an Office of Public Engagement at PHMSA would be a big improvement. Public engagement hasn't been a strength of the agency historically, but they have made improvements in recent years. But I hate to see how going from 13 employees down to 3 is going to backpedal that progress that they've made.
I agree with that. Community members and environmental groups have long raised concerns about potential corrosion issues in the Mountain Valley Pipeline in particular, which has been laying in fields exposed to the elements for years before all permitted approvals were forced through in the 2023 debt ceiling bill. Corrosion is also a growing issue for pipelines in coastal areas where rising sea levels and saltwater intrusion exacerbated by climate change are speeding up pipe degradation. So, Mr. Karam, as we look at reauthorizing this pipeline safety program, what additional authorities or resources does PHMSA need to better address corrosion control to ensure pipeline safety?
So there's 2 main defenses against corrosion. One is coating. That's really the first line of defense. And when coating fails, the second line of defense is cathodic protection. PHMSA has made some improvements to the cathodic protection on natural gas transmission pipelines recently, and we look forward to seeing how those are impacted, how those impact failures and effects of corrosion. But there aren't specific regulations on the condition of coating. They're pretty vague, and they leave a lot up to the operator's judgment. The consent order we saw with Mountain Valley Pipeline put some prescriptions on what tests coating needs to pass and things like that, and those would make a great addition to the regulations for all pipelines.
Thank you. And I don't have time for you to answer my last question, but for the record, because we also need to worry about cybersecurity, and I would be curious to, Mr. Karam, to know if you think that PHMSA and DHS, CISA in particular, are still well equipped to monitor and combat growing cyber threats to pipelines. And if you could submit that for the record, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama's 6th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll allow you to answer that question from Ms. McClellan. That's in line with some of my questions.
Well, I will say that cybersecurity is not really in the wheelhouse of pipeline safety for our organization. It's more of a reliability issue, so we don't really dig into the weeds on it. The way we've approached it is the integrity management program for high consequence areas requires an operator to identify all potential threats against the pipeline, create a plan to mitigate against those threats, and implement that plan. And cybersecurity threats should be considered one of those threats, and PHMSA could adopt some specific standards within integrity management. To the rest of your question, as far as agency coordination is beyond my expertise.
Mr. Black, I'd like for you to take a shot at that question as well, but back in 2021, we had a ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, which was in my district. And there have been multiple attacks at various healthcare facilities around the country. And as more pipeline networks become part of that equation, the threat of another attack is very much a real possibility, whether it's fuel line like the Colonial Pipeline or other pipelines. Can you address where you think we are in terms of protecting our pipelines from cyber attacks and what we need to do to protect them?
Glad to address both of you. Cybersecurity is very important to pipelines. Like any Fortune 500 company, pipeline operators need to maintain safeguards to protect their commercial systems and their operational systems. We'll do that in concert with the Transportation Security Administration, working with them on cyber directives. I believe you asked about CISA reauthorization. LEPA supports reauthorization of CISA. That will give pipeline operators the opportunity, a safe place to work with governments to talk about threats. It's quite important that PHMSA coordinate with those with cybersecurity expertise to make sure that anything that PHMSA does is in concert with what they know about how to do cybersecurity for pipelines, which quickly evolving technologies and threats. Very important.
So are you hearing much on that from industry?
Every day, we know there are attempts to breaches. I participate in classified briefings from government. We must always have our guard on pipeline safety. Thankfully, there are recommended practices. There are interactions with government and experts to try and improve that. We can never stop our vigilance.
Do you feel like PHMSA is weighing in on this properly? They're doing their part? Or do we need to be doing more?
PHMSA is not key on cybersecurity, and I think that's okay. We'll work with CISA and with TSA. We need PHMSA to make sure they're talking with them. Many of these briefings, PHMSA is a part of those. That coordination should be done right to make sure there's not conflicts and overlapping and pipeline operators being told to do two different things. We need to make sure we're doing that right.
Do we know if these are just in the ransomware attack situation with Colonial Pipeline? That was just people trying to extort money. But do we have nation state involved in this, or people who are being given safe harbors? We know they are, in China and Russia and other places to launch these attacks. Is there any
public
effort?
setting, generally, yes, and I know there's people I can encourage you to talk to in government that can help take you more, but we must be vigilant and must be working on this well every
Yeah,
day.
my concern about this transcends the pipelines. I mean, it's the critical infrastructure across the country that could be subject to a cyber attack, whether it's a ransomware attack or you know, from a state-sponsored terrorist group. I mean, it could be anything, and I think that our grid in its totality, not just the power grid, but the entire totality of the grid, whether it's pipelines or power, we've got to make this a very serious issue, a top priority.
We Americans
protecting
use
it.
all these forms of energy every day, and we can't afford to have something down from a cyber incident. You're absolutely right. Thank you for paying attention to that.
Well, I appreciate your response. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Colorado's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses. Mr. Black, I'm peering around here to you. You just said we should always have the eye on pipeline safety, and you were talking about cyber, but I'm assuming you mean in every respect. Pipeline safety is really critical for this country. Is that correct?
I'm making sure you're looking at me, Congresswoman. Yes, of course,
Thank you.
pipeline safety is our goal.
And Ms. Miller, I assume you would agree with that, too. Mr. Karam?
I would agree as well.
Mr. Karam?
Yes, I agree.
And Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, but it's sort of a fundamental. As we are transporting more material through pipelines, and many of them aging because of the administration's emphasis on oil and gas development, we need to make sure that our pipelines are safe. We need to figure out a way, preferably in a bipartisan way, to do that statutorily, and that's what we're talking about here today. But I was recently reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it talked about how the number of violation reviews has dropped by 95% in the first 4 months of this President Trump's second term compared to the same period under President Biden, and a 93% drop compared to Donald Trump's first term. And at the same time, the president has said that he doesn't want enforcement in a lot of these areas. And so and also, of course, then there's DOGE unceremoniously just having these layoffs across government, which we don't really know how many of those people were laid off, I don't think, at PHMSA. But given the dramatic drop of open reviews of safety violations, I'm not sure that means that there aren't violations. It just, I think, means that there aren't reviews. So, Mr. Karam, I want to ask you, isn't it true that significant pipeline incidents have not decreased over the past 20 years?
That is true.
So let's talk about the Keystone Pipeline leak in Kansas, which was just 3 years ago, the largest offshore oil spill in almost a decade, and the third major spill in 5 years. That was quite serious. Is that right?
Yes, that was a lot of oil.
A lot of oil. And then last year, a pipeline in Louisiana leaked for almost two hours because there were no pipeline operators on site, and the monitoring equipment malfunction. So that meant many residents weren't even notified of the leak. That was also pretty serious, wasn't it?
Yes.
And are there other examples of leaks that we're seeing that are just happening right now?
Yes, you can look at the NTSB open investigation docket and see lots of examples of what the NTSB is investigating. Also, they're recently closed. There was a 1 million gallon spill off the coast of Louisiana that they just completed their investigation of, and unfortunately, there's many, many stories.
So reducing the number, so the fact there's fewer safety violations, that doesn't mean necessarily there's that many, 95% fewer leaks.
Correct.
So before the Trump administration took over, PHMSA was already deemed to be understaffed and underfunded. Is that right?
Yes.
And then since President Trump took office, more than half of the senior executive roles at PHMSA are empty due to a hiring freeze and buyout offers from DOGE. Is that right?
As far as I know, it is.
Okay. And now the Trump administration's recent budget request would keep PHMSA's funding completely flat and is $16 million less than the Biden administration's last proposed budget. Is that your understanding?
I have not looked at the president's budget.
Okay. Now, so if we have flat or reduced staffing, what risk is that going to pose to public safety, do you think?
Well, I believe that PHMSA was already an under-resourced, understaffed agency, given the huge charge that they have on pipeline safety and the 3 million miles of pipeline. We wanted to see significant increases to that funding, and seeing flat or reduced funding, I can't imagine how that won't impact
Will that help
safety.
with safety inspections?
We would like to see that, an increase in funding.
Would the decreased funding help with increasing safety inspections?
No, my understanding is the reductions in force, the inspectors were protected from those reductions in force, and they were not allowed to participate in that program, but we haven't seen any numbers on that. But I will say that beyond just inspectors, the entire agency is dedicated to safety, and they support inspectors, they support regulations and enforcement, and so any reduction would be a
The
reduction.
gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 11th District, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some questions that I'll get to, but does anybody have any thoughts on this last discussion we just heard, that safety incidents are out of control, or want to push back on anything? Mr.
Sure,
Black?
I'll cover enforcement. I divide this year into 2 chapters. Before PHMSA introduced Office of Chief Counsel memos adopting mandates from Congress in the 2020 Act. Since then, I understand enforcement numbers are more similar. Before then, even when numbers were lower, the quality was high in terms of responding to the major incidents. On 2 lines, they issued corrective action orders, and the industry supports PHMSA being an effective regulator.
Okay.
I would just echo that our members do encourage that we have a strong and well-informed, well-resourced regulator for but not only the safety, but also make sure that we have predictable expectations for our operations.
Yeah, but reasonable.
Correct.
Being the key word. Yep, thank you. Okay, and Ms. Miller, I'll stick with you, and I'll start with the gas gathering rule. And as you're aware, this significantly expanded PHMSA's jurisdiction, bringing more than 400,000 additional miles of gathering lines under federal oversight, and they're located in districts like mine in the Permian Basin, where there's a heavy presence of production there, and very important. And the scope of implementation of this rule could have major implications for how the gathering systems are built and operated going forward. So we want to get this right. We want to be reasonable, and safety is important. It is a major concern, and there are other concerns as well. But from your perspective, what implementation challenges are operators currently facing on the ground, and how can PHMSA better distinguish between high risk and then lower risk areas? Again, reasonable in the way governance, which is not always the way it's done, but.
No, I appreciate that question very much. Yes, we do very much value the opportunity to have risk-based assessment of safety concerns. just because, for example, a pipeline may have, two different pipelines may have similar diameter or similar pressure, there are other circumstances to consider in order to make sure that we're assessing what the risk is appropriately, including, for example, proximity to populations, length of pipeline. One of the things I also wanted to make sure that this subcommittee is familiar with is the difference between the differences that exist between gathering pipelines and transmission pipelines, not only physically but commercially. So it's important to remember that the interstate pipelines are subject to regulated rates with uniform tariffs versus gathering pipelines are subject to market-based negotiated compensation and negotiated commercial terms. So very different application.
I'm sorry that more of my colleagues aren't here to hear that, and we always take trips down there, and we do point out the difference in the Permian Basin of gathering systems versus the larger pipelines, interstate type. And just real quickly, and I want to get to Mr. Moriarty, but having frequent GPAC meetings and ensuring participation from stakeholders, what's the importance of that, and how does that help PHMSA regulate?
We really appreciate the GPAC process. We think it helps bring more informed regulation, which therefore is more likely to be implementable. And we want to encourage that GPAC process also include more insights from gathering operators when it's regulating, as it is more, as PHMSA is more often regulating gathering now.
Thank you. I had Mr. Moriarty, I had some things I was going to say, but let me just get right to the question. In your view, is there any realistic path to a reliable grid without natural gas playing a role as the backbone?
Thank you, Congressman. No, there is not.
And would you agree that if we're going to meet the rising demand while also keeping the lights on, that we need to get serious about modernizing and expanding our natural gas infrastructure? And give us your thoughts on that.
Yes, I would agree with that. Natural gas pipelines are the safest way to move the energy that this nation needs. And there's ever more demand for energy across our service territories, which is the United States. And to meet those demands, we need to construct and safely operate pipelines as well as LNG storage facilities.
Where did the negativity come from in this country towards pipelines? How did we get here?
Well, I don't know. At Chesapeake Utilities, and that's what I can speak of, we take very seriously our obligations to the communities we serve. And those communities are where we live and where we work.
Yeah.
So if an issue is raised with us, we immediately study it and address it. So I'm not quite sure what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah. Science and math, they're the safest form of transportation and transmission, and they keep the lights on. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts 4th District, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the witnesses being here today. I do want to start off by echoing the comments from my colleague from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez. Like him, I sat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee last Congress. The difference in process on pipeline safety reauthorization between what I saw there and what's been described about this committee's process last year could not be more different. That on T&I was a bipartisan bill. Not everyone got everything they wanted, but everyone got something, and we were able to move the ball on safety. And it just seems like that's the opposite of what happened here last year. I really hope this time is different because there is a lot of areas where we can move the ball forward in a bipartisan way. Mr. Karam, did the Pipeline Safety Trust think that there were serious issues with the partisan bill that E&C Republicans put forward last year?
There were, as mentioned earlier, there were several provisions in the bill that had nothing to do with pipeline safety, like permitting reform, gas stove protections, and CCS well permitting that really don't have anything to do with pipeline safety.
Mr. Black, you had said earlier that your constituency industry wants predictable regulation. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you think that when items that are unrelated to the core issue of pipeline safety and that have a strongly polarized and partisan bent to them are added to pipeline safety bills, does that make the overall product more or less predictable?
Well, we support Congress reauthorizing the pipeline safety laws. We supported the T&I bill and the Energy and Commerce bill. In the end, we want good policies enacted. Up to you all to how to do it.
Right, but if the policies enacted are done on a partisan basis, does that inspire more or less confidence in industry that they can count on those regulations over generational time span? Because you're making long-term capital investments, right? So having the goalposts move on you, not helpful.
And I understand your question. We wanted Congress to act on reauthorization last time. We had priorities. We haven't achieved them. We'd like you to do it now, whatever that takes.
And Mr. Karam, I assume you didn't think it was perfect, but did the Pipeline Safety Trust think that the bipartisan T&I bill was closer to the mark than the partisan ENC bill?
Yes, there were some good provisions in there. We didn't think it went far enough to make a real meaningful difference on pipeline safety, but there were really good provisions that we supported and support.
And did you want to weigh in on that, Mr. Black?
We supported both bills.
You supported both bills, but they were very different bills. So was there elements of T&I or ENC that you thought were particularly productive?
I'm trying to remember. There were things that were in energy and commerce that weren't in T&I, and we were hoping that that would get reconciled if there was one big bill going to the floor. Bipartisan action is necessary to make a law. How you start, again, is up to you all. Our goal is smart public policies that are improving safety.
Bipartisan action is necessary to make a law.
Sure.
Agreed. I want to be positive today, talk about some of the important things to include in a pipeline safety package rather than just the process that I didn't think was productive. One point that's come across in multiple testimonies is that some states could stand to improve their programs to prevent third-party excavation damages. Mr. Karam, could you talk a little bit about what changes states can make to those programs and how PHMSA and Congress could play a role?
Sure. I think that's an area where all four witnesses agree on the improvements to be made. The Common Ground Alliance has a set of best practices for state programs, and some states implement all of those best practices and others don't. And having those as the baseline for all states, I think, would make a big improvement on damage prevention. Things like exemptions to 811. Certain states allow certain municipalities not to have to call 811, for example, and not allowing that would be great.
Does anybody want to weigh in on that?
All these industries are going to support improved damage prevention. There are provisions, I believe, that were in the T&I bill last time, can't remember, about energy and commerce to move forward damage prevention, and we would support those.
Yeah, the T&I bill had some good stuff in there. Yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Can you see me for that big chair? Ms. Miller, as Ranking Member Pallone stated, GPA successfully argued that some PHMSA regulations have not been cost-effective, but how important is cost-effective regulation for operators as you prioritize safety?
We believe cost-benefit analysis that is part of the PHMSA regulation rulemaking process is very important. We want to make sure that we are able to prioritize the highest value safety priorities, and also make sure that regulation is implementable, that there's technology actually available in order to achieve those goals. The process now for the implementation of rules, which provides for input from the GPAC process, but also from the public, ensures that there's a more informed regulation that's more likely to be executed.
Was the leak detection and repair rule finalized by the previous administration workable for operators, and did it align with the congressional intent of the Pipes Act of 2020?
We do not believe that it did. We do support leak detection and repair technologies being implemented in accordance with Congress's mandate.
Okay, all right. You know, there's an increasing threat to pipeline safety, as we all know, from bad actors that wish to cause harm to pipelines and surrounding communities. In 2022, there was a movie entitled How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And it was portrayed by a group of teenagers trying to blow up an oil pipeline to protest climate change. Mr. Black, what measures have operators taken to prevent bad actors disrupting pipelines and jeopardizing public safety?
It was so sad to see a movie that was glorifying attacks on pipelines. I remember at the time us encouraging federal actors to put out bulletins to be looking for copycat activities on that. Thankfully, I'm not aware of anything that happened because of that movie. Congress can help by closing loopholes to make it clear that if you're just turning a valve or damaging a pipeline component, you think you're not hurting anything, you could be leading to a pressure buildup or a rupture later that hurts yourself, people, and the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Ms. Miller, how can Congress ensure that pipeline permitting timelines are predictable and not subject to unnecessary delays and litigation?
Well, we would appreciate Congress's attention to that. We do think that that permitting for pipelines, which are essential to deliver natural gas to the communities that need it, is very important, and there is an opportunity to make sure that that is a balanced process that reflects not only the need to have access to energy, but also safety and environmental protections. And we believe that's possible. We also believe that that's very important priority for our operators across the industry.
Okay. Mr. Moriarty, as the U.S. expands hydrogen pipeline networks, what unique safety and regulatory challenges do these fuels represent, and how should PHMSA's mandate evolve to address them?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question. We have been blending hydrogen with natural gas at a facility that we have in Florida. And we've blended up to 5%. And it was not only inexpensive, but also very good for the generation that was happening there. So we're bullish on the role of hydrogen.
Yeah.
What we are still studying, and I think the industry is studying, is how much blending can occur without challenging the integrity of those pipelines.
Yeah.
Our interstate pipeline infrastructure is the envy of the world. I mean, we're able to deliver energy and so many others, to the people here in the country as well as to the industry. So we see further study on that is helpful as you consider PHMSA's reauthorization.
Okay, thank you, sir. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Dakota for 5 minutes for questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Wasn't expecting to be up so soon. I'm usually the very last, so guess it pays to stick around. Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you lending your expertise to this very, very important subject. I've been a pipeline proponent for many years. I spent 12 years as a utility regulator and permitted a lot of pipelines myself in the state of North Dakota. So I want to talk a little bit about the state role first. I have recognized the challenges at PHMSA in terms of staffing for years. One of the challenges is they don't operate a state inspection training program as effectively as they could to help get more state inspectors out there. It takes too long to certify these people. So what do you think they could be doing to help, and what are you guys focusing on in terms of encouraging PHMSA to use like remote training programs and really get the training system up to speed so that the state inspectors can hit the ground running sooner? Mr. Black, maybe you and Mr. Karam.
It's great to have you on the committee, given your role in North Dakota. Thank you and welcome. State inspectors with quality experience and knowledge on pipeline inspections is very important. I've been to PHMSA's training center in Oklahoma City, and you're right, it's important to be able to expand the capacity of that training. It's in the industry's interest that anybody inspecting a pipeline is quality, knows what they're doing, and is working in concert with others. We'd like to do that. We'd like to also see states reduce damage prevention exemptions so that we can protect pipeline safety, and then to work in their inspections with PHMSA to make sure that they're not duplicative when PHMSA has approved a state to inspect interstate transmission.
Okay. I would encourage you to encourage PHMSA to do online training for state inspectors, at least for some of the programs. They don't have to be present.
I'll make that call
to do
today.
that.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Karam, any?
Yeah, I'll echo Mr. Black's comment. I welcome your expertise and experience to the subcommittee, and I think the quality of your question really shows that expertise that you bring, and so thank you for it. It is you've identified a real issue with state programs. I think in addition to how long training takes, I think increasing PHMSA's ability to attract and retain talent. I know there's a lot of competition for these inspectors once they're trained to be, paid more by the industry. And so giving PHMSA more flexibility, giving the state programs more flexibility under the PHMSA program in their ability to attract and retain through the funding and their agreements, I think would go a long way in keeping that talent on the state programs longer.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'd also encourage you to make those comments to PHMSA.
I will do so.
I'm curious about this demonstration program that was kind of choked off by the last administration. Mr. Black, I mean, everybody here has talked about the use of technology, and that's something that we should be able to agree on a bipartisan manner. Let's use the technology for a better purpose. What do we need to do to reinvigorate this pilot program so we can test some of this stuff and get it in the field?
First, Congresswoman, reauthorize the program in this upcoming reauthorization. It lapsed. Nobody used it. It was because PHMSA applied rules that you all didn't tell them to do. So tell them to do it without bureaucratic hurdles. I don't think they will apply the special permit process to it or NEPA to these decisions, but show PHMSA the importance that you have in demonstrating new technologies and how they can improve pipeline safety.
Okay, very good. And then my last question, this will have to be quick. Our infrastructure is aging, but it's really, really hard for companies to build new pipelines. I mean, so this one goes to you, Mr. Karam. You've got kind of a bully pulpit to talk about these issues in terms of a public safety position and talk about the value of pipelines in terms of being the safest method to transport a lot of these products. What are you doing to help educate the public about the need for replacing old, aging pipelines that are more prone to leaks with the new stuff to help advocate for permitting processes that are certain and the construction of new pipeline after that?
Well, we don't necessarily see the permitting reform as part of our mission on pipeline safety, but we do advocate for the pipe replacement program that was in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and has been some draft legislation on this round of reauthorization, and we continue to support that program to replace that aging, leak-prone, problematic pipe.
Okay. I'm over time. Sorry. Thank you all.
The
Appreciate your
gentlelady's time
back.
has expired and yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 33rd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And let me start by reaffirming, I think, what we all know to be true, and that pipeline safety is not a luxury, but it's a necessity. And we rely over literally 3 million miles of pipeline to move energy and materials that power this country. It's very critical for keeping our houses cool and keeping them warm and jobs. So, I mean, it's important for everything, and that's why PHMSA's mission is so important. And that's why this committee's work to reauthorize PHMSA is long overdue. I think that we've let the agency's authorities lapse even as pipeline miles expand and aging infrastructure strains and new fuels like hydrogen and CO2 are finally starting to enter the system. And as a Texan, I know better than most how central pipelines are to American energy. They're efficient, they're economical, and they're essential, but they're also not infallible. And we have to look for ways that we can raise the bar on safety with new energy demand surging, the country growing, things like hydrogen and CO2 infrastructure coming online, and extreme weather risks and extreme weather extremes increasing. The stakes really couldn't be higher. We need PHMSA to ensure that we have the tools, the staff, and the authority to really prioritize safety and reduce leaks and protect a lot of our communities as well as we experience this growth and this new demand for energy. And so I think that what we really need to be asking ourselves is, how can we make real progress on pipeline safety without getting bogged down in partisanship, which is something that I've really stressed a lot on being on the subcommittee. And so at the end of the day, this hearing is not just about policy, but it's really whether about families can feel safe in their homes and businesses, and whether or not we're going to have the energy that we needed. And so I wanted to ask Mr. Karam, your organization often works across stakeholder lines, and I wanted to ask, like, what are 2 or 3 practical bipartisan steps this committee could take in reauthorization that would increase pipeline safety and community trust, but still be workable for the industry?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Two things come to mind, both of which I mentioned briefly. The first is in-home methane detectors or natural gas alarms. The NTSB has been recommending these devices for some time. There's been some disagreement as to whether that's really under PHMSA or a state program's jurisdiction, but I firmly believe that it is part of a operator's public awareness responsibilities and could be part of the public awareness regulations. And you know, this subcommittee could make that happen. We saw in Japan when they adopted widespread use of natural gas alarms, we saw the incidents decrease by 90%. I firmly believe that widespread adoption of natural gas alarms will make a meaningful difference quickly on fatalities from pipelines. And another would be fire shutoff valves or thermally activated shutoff valves. These would help mitigate the damage from a fire in a building that could be made worse by the presence of gas service. They're very simple, inexpensive devices. I believe they cost $75. They're required in Massachusetts already and have been for some time. A low melting point polymer keeps the valve open. When exposed to heat, it automatically closes, and it would prevent gas from making that fire worse and fueling it. They don't require any ongoing maintenance, and they're very easy to install on existing service lines.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you, we know that communities are more likely to push back on CO2 and hydrogen projects if they don't understand the risks or benefits, and we now see this happening across the Midwest with the CO2 pipelines. What tools like mapping, early engagement, or post-incident transparency can Congress support to build trust in these next-gen pipelines?
I think the biggest piece of building trust for this type of pipeline is improving the regulations. There are glaring regulatory gaps. Certain types of CO2 pipelines aren't covered by any minimum safety regulations. And the regulations that do apply, the pipelines that are covered by regulations, those regulations don't really address the unique physical properties and risks that CO2 pose. So I think the biggest thing that could be done for building trust in these pipelines is modernizing the regulations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Mr. Chairman, as I get ready to close, I hope that too we can address this again to talk about how we can get the public more involved before something bad happens. Oftentimes it takes something really bad to happen before the public really gets engaged. We need to start looking at how we can get in front of a lot of these things and not just be responding to unfortunate situations. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia's 12th District, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chair Lauder, and thank you for holding this important hearing to discuss policy on expanding our pipeline capacity. I want to thank the witnesses for being here to testify. Building up our pipeline capacity is critical to delivering affordable energy to our constituents across the country and our allies. We've heard from the witnesses that pipelines are the safest way to deliver energy. As we are working on modernizing the role of Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, of PHMSA, it is critical we ensure it works to enhance our pipeline infrastructure. Mr. Moriarty.
Yes, sir.
You work in the local distribution of natural gas. Could you expand on how you get gas safely into communities and the need to build up pipeline capacity to deliver low-cost energy to consumers?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I would like to answer it by an example. Somerset County in Maryland did not have access to natural gas. The county there was desperate to get new energy delivered because of the economic development that would occur and the increase in employment. We work closely with the community as well as with the state, and we now built a pipeline into Somerset County, so for the first time, they have access to natural gas, which has led to more building, more manufacturing, and more jobs.
That's a great example, and thank you for that. Mr. Black, Ms. Miller, you both mentioned the need to reform the special permit program. Can you share how reforming this program will expand pipeline infrastructure projects?
The special permit program has been nearly broken by the application of unnecessary conditions that are unrelated to the waiver being requested, and they've taken too long. PHMSA should reform the special permit process, and Congress should tell them that they should. Decision delays, decision deadlines, excuse me, and no extraneous conditions. How will that help? One-size-fits-all regulations can't possibly apply to all the different types of conditions, operations, pipe that's out there. If we reform the special permit process, get people using it, have regulations that are suited to that specific pipe, that contributes to unleashing energy because we can have the pipe that we need to go where we need it to go.
Okay, Ms. Miller?
I would echo what Mr. Black said. We agree that not only the special permit program offers that opportunity, but I would point out as well that performance-based measures and PHMSA pipeline safety programming can allow for the evolving technology in order for more fit-for-purpose solutions.
Okay, as a follow-up, how can PHMSA modernize the special permit process so operators can realize the intended benefits of the process, Mr. Miller? Ms. Miller, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I would actually, I defer to Mr. Black, who did such a nice job of describing the special permit program and the opportunities for improving upon it, but we echo that there's an opportunity to allow for the fit-for-purpose solutions that bring better safety outcomes.
Okay,
At
Mr.
its essence,
Black.
Congressman, no unrelated conditions. Deal with what the pipeline operator is requesting. Don't take this opportunity to impose something else. Do that through the regulatory process. Second, have a decision deadline so that permits get ruled on and we get these changes made.
Okay, all right. Ms. Miller, it's my understanding that you have some LNG members. I believe exporting LNG to our allies is key to our national security. Can you share how updating pipeline safety programs would be beneficial to our LNG exports?
Having a greater supply available for export and not only facilitates the export of that to our allies, but that also has environmental benefits because natural gas is a more environmentally friendly energy source, and energy demands, of course, are increasing around the world. And making that available across the world, our American natural gas around the world provides benefits for us all.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity for us to maybe reverse the trade deficit issues and other things that obviously the president's working on. Would that be correct?
I agree.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to you all for being here today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of this time. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. I want to start just by expressing how important pipeline safety is all over, but particularly in my home state. It's been about 26 years since the Olympic pipeline explosion in Bellingham, which is less than an hour from my district. And this tragedy killed 3 young people, injured 8 more, and severely impacted the ecosystem and the nearby communities. And many of the safety protections and considerations currently in place stem from this tragedy. So I just wanted to remind us all why we're here and why PHMSA is so important. I'd love to just turn to hydrogen, a fuel that Washington State is heavily investing in. Mr. Moriarty, in your testimony, you discussed the role that your utility plays in the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub. I was wondering if you could discuss the economic opportunities that this hub will bring to your region.
Thank you for that question. There was a great deal of excitement when Mach 2 was announced, which is our hydrogen hub in the Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Our role as a company was going to be to use our safety town, which is where we have built little houses and little facilities. And I say little, it's just all the appliances that you would use are in there. And we use that to train our employees, but also to train first responders. Our role at Mach 2 was going to be to blend hydrogen into those energy sources to see how they reacted, and then to help train our folks and others to do that. So there was a great deal of excitement when it first started.
That is really cool that Mach 2 has safety down there to do practice and drills. and I think it all makes all of us feel better. We also were very excited about, and we are very excited about being a hydrogen hub in Washington State. In particular, in Washington, where we have 70% of our power comes from hydropower, there it's clean hydrogen, which is particularly exciting. It's a way to store that excess energy, and it's one of the reasons I'm so disappointed that this administration and House Republicans are undermining the efforts toward hydrogen, which is one of our important future fuels. When they deliberated about the one big ugly bill, they slashed tax credits for clean energy, including weakening the 45V clean hydrogen tax credit, which is crucial to get this nascent hydrogen industry off the ground. And both Mach 2 and the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub may be on the chopping block, according to some leaked documents. I will also note that one of the largest hydrogen hubs is in Texas, and that these exist in red states and blue states and all over, and we need to be thinking about the future. For the purposes of this hearing and safety, I just wanted to discuss, again, the knowledge gaps that we still need to fill in terms of how to integrate hydrogen fuel into the existing pipeline systems and infrastructure through blending, and later, hopefully, maybe even on its own. And these safety issues have not been fully discussed. Mr. Karam, it's good to see you again. We talked about some of these unknowns last time you were here and why further studies are needed to evaluate what modifications are needed to existing infrastructure to be compatible with hydrogen. We didn't know a ton at the time. It's been about a year. We still haven't passed PHMSA reauthorization and with a hydrogen blending study to address these safety concerns. And I was wondering if you could speak to the urgency of this, the consequences of not filling those knowledge gaps sooner rather than later.
Yes, thank you for the question. At this point, operators do not need to report to anyone, including PHMSA or their state regulator, if they are blending hydrogen into their system, as long as it's below 50%. So we don't really know how urgent this is because we're not aware of how many operators are blending hydrogen into existing systems. I will say that the knowledge gaps and research gaps and regulatory gaps that we discussed last time are largely still present. There hasn't been a lot of progress made as far as I know.
Well, I hope the way we discover the problems isn't through a catastrophe at Safety Town and figuring out where there are gaps in our knowledge and pipelines. So I want to thank you, and I will yield back unless you want to use those 6 seconds. You looked eager to say something. No, okay, I will yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Iowa's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Castor, for holding this important hearing on pipeline safety. American energy dominance requires modern pipeline infrastructure and effective regulations that truly consider the cost-benefit of additional bureaucratic barriers. These pipelines heat our homes and power our farms. They deliver energy affordably and safely across the country, making modern life possible. To think if we replaced every pipeline with a semi-tractor trailer truck, tanker, or rail car, how much more safety would be put at risk. We need clear federal standards, not 20-year-old rules that ignore modern technology and innovation. This isn't complicated. Focus on actual safety, streamline permitting. American energy security depends on building the infrastructure, and that means smart, targeted policies, not one-size-fits-all mandates that threaten reliability and investment. And to your point, Mr. Moriarty, I have, since I've been in Congress, which was January 3rd, 2021, have been talking with 2 of my counties in southeast Iowa along the Mississippi River who desperately want more pipeline natural gas delivered to them, and it is absolutely affecting economic growth, and they've lost businesses relocating there because of this issue. And Mr. Black, your members use advanced technologies for leak detection voluntarily. Why is flexibility important in allowing operators to deploy the right technology for their specific systems rather than having a prospective mandate from the federal government?
Well, first, technology, Congresswoman. There are lots of different types of pipelines. There are ones that have many laterals and many injection points and takeoffs, and there are ones that just go one direction. It's important to have a leak detection program that reflects the characteristics of that system. If there are prescriptive regulations, first, those might become quickly obsolescent by advancing technology. Second, they might not reflect the unique characteristics of that pipelines. Right now, PHMSA inspects pipeline operators, asks them about how they're approaching their pipeline system, and has that type of conversation. That's the way that it should be.
So it's sort of like the federal government telling a farmer how much input, how much pesticide, fungicide, fertilizer, when to harvest, when to plant, not knowing when the corn's dry, when the ground's ready, how much rain they're expecting, and if there's flooding.
That sounds right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moriarty, Congress mandated a safety program for idled pipelines in 2020, but it hasn't been implemented. As an operator, what unique risks do idle pipelines pose, and why do we need federal standards?
Thank you for that question. Idle pipelines are wasted capacity that could be repurposed for other uses. We try and ensure that all the pipelines that we have are fully utilized and they're safe. I think when you idle a pipeline and it's not being used, you just raise the risks of safety with those pipelines.
Again, for Mr. Moriarty, you described sophisticated cybersecurity measures at Chesapeake. How can PHMSA support industry-led cybersecurity efforts without creating duplicative regulations with TSA and other agency requirements?
Well, thank you very much. Cybersecurity is one of the top risks that face companies like ours. We have invested a great deal in a cyber team. We have one of the best in the country, and we're very, very proud of that. We have attacks daily from nation states and others. We have partners at the FBI and other places that we deal with where we share information. I think if PHMSA were to step in, we'd want a holistic approach because time is of the essence when you're dealing with a cyber event.
Thank you. And Ms. Miller, CO2 has been used for enhanced oil recovery for decades, helping maximize domestic energy production. Can you explain how CO2 infrastructure supports traditional oil and gas operations and why it's important for American energy security?
Thank you for that question. Actually, few of GPA Midstream members currently operate or are planning to operate CO2 pipelines, but we recognize the importance of having the pipelines available to solve and support some of the environmental opportunities available in the industry. We do support strong pipeline safety for all pipelines, including CO2, and we would support PHMSA's process to establish those rules properly.
Are there risks associated with the CO2 pipeline versus other pipelines if proper safety protocols are put in place?
I would have to follow up for you, but I'd be happy to.
All right, thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 15th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. This is an incredibly important topic to my district. 15 years ago, a natural gas pipeline exploded in the Glenview neighborhood of San Bruno, just a few miles from my home in South San Francisco. Eyewitnesses said that the fireball shot over 1,000 feet into the air. The blast killed 8 people, injured dozens more, and destroyed or damaged more than 100 homes. The impact on the community was devastating and long-lasting, and it's exactly why we need to get this right. An NTSB report concluded that, quote, no one knew whether the pipeline under San Bruno was safe, not the utility, not the state regulators, and not the federal regulators, end quote. They went on to call it a failure of the entire system, a system of checks and balances that should have prevented this disaster. So, Mr. Karam, can you walk us through the root causes of the 2010 San Bruno explosion, specifically the organizational breakdowns and regulatory gaps that allowed such a catastrophe to occur?
Well, I can do my best. It's been a little while since I've looked at that NTSB report, but I recognize we're coming up on 15 years in September, and my heart goes out to that community and your community. There was a section of pipe there that I don't think a lot of operators would consider pipe. And because of the lack of initial testing standards, requiring to pressure test that pipe, it was never allowed to fail under that hydro test to discover that it wasn't capable of handling that pressure of natural gas. A lot of that came from acquisitions and lack of record keeping through acquisitions from company to company. And so the NTSB report had a long list of recommendations on how operators could get to know their system to make sure that they would be able to identify if there were that kind of rogue pipe somewhere in their system susceptible to fail. And PHMSA has, it took a long time, but they have enacted a series of rulemakings in response to those recommendations, and there are some real improvements in those regulations that they've passed. Unfortunately, because of the non-application clause and cost benefit, not all of the NTSB recommendations were able to be implemented by PHMSA. Some of those key recommendations.
Thank you for that. So under the Trump administration, PHMSA's enforcement actions have dropped to record lows, and nearly all of the agency's senior career staff has left. The agency has also delayed publishing a rule on gas leaks. Instead of prioritizing safety, unfortunately, the administration has proposed slashing PHMSA's budget by $16 million and threatened to withhold funding from your organization, Mr. Karam, the Pipeline Safety Trust. So given all of that, my question is to you again, sir. What does Congress need to do to ensure that pipelines are actually safer today than they were 15 years ago?
I think Congress serves a critical oversight role, authorizing the appropriate level of funding, appropriating that funding, and then overseeing how they are implementing the Pipeline Safety Act. Hearings such as this can do that. Hearings with PHMSA would be helpful as well. Congress asked PHMSA to, in its oversight role, asked PHMSA to produce a web chart showing its progress towards all of the mandates towards rulemaking, and required that that be updated on a monthly basis. And I think that's a key piece of oversight. It's also key for members of the public to really see where those rulemakings are prioritized. And the last time I checked, that hadn't been updated since January.
Appreciate the renewed attention on this. Thank you all for your testimony. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina's 7th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a fascinating hearing, and I really appreciate the witnesses for being here. I'm struck a little bit by some of the commentary from the other side of the dais, that there is a perceived lack of enforcement. Mr. Black, earlier in a dialogue with Mr. Pfluger, you talked about 2 different sessions, if you will. What did you mean by that, and could you expand upon that when it comes to enforcement?
A couple of months ago, PHMSA's Office of Chief Counsel issued publicly guidance on how this administration is going to be enforcing pipeline safety. Congress in the 2020 Act had said that more due process needed to be provided to respondents, so that was part of it. Before that series of memos from the Chief Counsel, there were public reports that numbers were down. Since then, the numbers of enforcement activities are higher. I don't think it's the numbers that matter. To me, we look at, is PHMSA on the case on major incidents? Do pipeline operators recognize that PHMSA is going to deter unsafe pipeline operations? Pipeline operators absolutely know that PHMSA has that authority, and they're not thinking that this is, they're recognizing that we still face enforcement potential from PHMSA.
So you're not maybe the Chicken Little exercise that we heard from the other side about the skies falling. What you're saying is that you don't think that the current numbers substantiate that allegation.
Correct, and I'm not sure if numbers are the right way to do it. On the Keystone, there was a quick corrective action order telling the pipeline operator change its operations until PHMSA approved it. That's the type of activities PHMSA is supposed to do.
Mr. Black, who was the head of PHMSA under the Biden administration?
It was Tristan Brown, the deputy administrator. There was no confirmed administrator.
Why is that?
We don't know. In my time, there had never been an administration that failed to nominate an administrator.
Well, I mean, we've all seen that the former president was kind of asleep at the wheel for most of his administration. So what you're saying is that there was no actual head. There was a deputy administrator, but no one that was nominated by the White House to be in the role.
Correct.
Is that the same today, or is there an actual?
There's a nominee, Paul Roberti, from the president to be the Senate-confirmed head of PHMSA, and he had his confirmation hearing last week, and we hope he's adopted. We think it's better for PHMSA to have Senate-confirmed leadership to be able to work with the Congress.
What is your understanding, Mr. Black, of the budget of PHMSA under the 2025 fiscal year? Do you know roughly what that number is?
No, but I understand that the president's budget request is the same as it was in the last year.
$218 million, does that sound about
Yes,
right
sir.
for fiscal year 2025?
Yes.
How much of an increase do you think that is from, say, fiscal year 2023?
I don't know.
$73 million.
Right.
So you've seen a dramatic, so when we talk about scaling back funding or saving the taxpayers' money, this isn't a scenario where their budget has been flat for years and they're receiving a cut. In fact, they received a 50% increase just 2 years prior to that. So again, when we're talking about funding, I think it's important to understand the context of that funding and where these funding mechanisms came from. Do you agree?
Yes, if we think PHMSA should be focused on pipeline safety, should have qualified personnel with STEM experience and pipeline operations expertise, if it takes Congress giving PHMSA extra help, we're ready to have them do that. We want PHMSA to have the resources that it needs.
To do the job of the original mission,
Focus on
perhaps.
pipeline safety, yes.
Correct, not the other ancillary things. I mean, they've kind of become a de facto EPA, if you will, under at least the Biden administration.
The emphasis was not there, right? There were congressional mandates, say, on idled pipe that were just not issued during the last administration, and they bungled the implementation of the Pipeline Safety Technology Demonstration Program. We hope that this PHMSA will be focused on the right things.
Thank you for that. Ms. Miller, one example of PHMSA regulations not keeping pace with modern-day conditions is the class location regulations, which have not been updated in about 50 years. Do you agree that population changes around pipelines necessitate changes to existing laws? And would those changes enhance pipeline safety?
We believe that there are opportunities to ensure that risk assessments, including cross location analysis, is done to ensure that the right priorities are and resources are made available for the highest priority safety results. So yes.
Thank you. PHMSA should also integrate efficiency and flexibility into the regulations to incentivize PHMSA to modernize. Would PHMSA integrating more integrity management principles into class location regulations elevate safety standards across more miles of pipelines?
We believe it would. Performance-based measures across not only interstate pipelines, but also for gathering and local pipelines would matter as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California's 7th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Now, the safe operation of our nation's pipelines should be urgently priority for this committee. But it's now been almost 2 years since its authorization expired with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. PHMSA is crucial for protecting communities from deadly pipeline accidents, but Republicans on this committee clearly don't see this as a priority. Instead of working towards a common-sense reauthorization of PHMSA, Republicans wasted the last 2 years trying to force through an extreme partisan bill that would cut pipeline safety by 18%. Now, under President Trump, I'm gravely concerned that pipeline safety has been caught in a broader Republican effort to roll back critical safety and pollution regulations across the federal government. As my colleagues have discussed, multiple senior officials at PHMSA resigned or having been pushed out of the agency. There's been a sharp drop in the number of enforcement actions taken by PHMSA, and President Trump has rescinded critical pipeline safety rules. Now, Mr. Karam, I'm going to keep this very simple. Are these actions going to increase or decrease the likelihood of a deeply pipeline disaster?
Thank you for that. As I stated before, I believe strong regulations and effective enforcement are critical to pipeline safety, and actions that erode those, I fear, will hurt pipeline safety.
Exactly. Mr. Karam, this looks like a deliberate effort to cripple PHMSA's capacity to act as an effective safety regulator in order to benefit the oil and gas industry. Would you disagree?
I can't speculate as to the motivations behind the actions.
Okay. So it's not just PHMSA. This is part of a pattern. EPA staff has been told not to enforce pollution rules. The Department of Energy has been ordered to stop enforcing efficiency standards. The Department of Labor has been ordered to stop enforcing anti-discrimination laws. This is a deliberate, coordinated effort to weaken the protections that keep us safe. Now, I want to focus on the new rule for carbon dioxide pipelines for a moment, because I think it demonstrates this point. As you mentioned in your testimony, it's now been 5 years since the CO2 pipeline disaster in Mississippi that sent 45 people to the hospital. PHMSA proposed new rules to prevent this disaster from happening again, but President Trump immediately withdrew the new rule just as new CO2 pipelines are being built across the country. Mr. Karam, can you briefly describe some of the unique challenges and concerns surrounding the carbon dioxide pipelines?
Sure. So CO2 is an asphyxiant, and it's heavier than air. And it's usually transported in a pipeline in a dense phase. In the event of a pipeline rupture, large amounts of CO2 can escape from the pipeline, and it can move in long distances close to the ground in dangerous and even lethal concentrations. It's odorless, it can be invisible, making it really difficult to detect. So all of these unique physical properties really present unique risks relative to other types of pipelines and unique emergency response challenges as well.
How do the new proposed rule for CO2 pipelines address these challenges?
Well, it proposed new standards to ensure that ruptures would be less likely to occur, like stronger construction and design standards and real-time monitoring. It also made sure that all parts of the pipeline where a failure could affect a community would be subject to stricter safety standards, and it also made improvements to an operator's responsibility to ensure strong emergency response.
So does the president's decision to kill this rule make communities more safe or less safe?
Well, if it's between finalizing the proposed rule or not modernizing the regulations, not modernizing the regulations makes communities less safe.
Less safe. Mr. Karam, without new safety rules, we'll see another tragedy like the disaster in Mississippi.
I certainly hope not. We will be relying on operators to follow voluntary industry standards instead of the law.
Okay, let me just talk about hydrogen blending. Blending hydrogen into natural gas pipelines also prevents new safety concerns that need to be addressed. Mr. Karam, can you briefly describe some of the unique challenges and concerns with hydrogen blending?
In about 5 seconds.
I'm not sure I can do that in 5 seconds.
Okay.
Could the lady submit the question to the witness?
I certainly.
In writing?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida's 15th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here with us today. As American demand for energy continues to grow, it is essential that our pipeline infrastructure is prepared to meet this need. Pipelines are critical for transporting oil, natural gas, and our other energy resources. My home state of Florida is a large producer of electricity and relies heavily on pipelines to deliver energy. So I appreciate your testimony and the discussion. Mr. Moriarty, I'd like to return to something you said just a few moments ago. You mentioned that one of the top risks you perceive for pipeline safety is, in fact, cybersecurity. Would you share with us a bit more about the cyber threat landscape you are seeing and how you're partnering with federal agencies like the FBI and CISA to meet that threat?
Thank you very much for the question. I guess what I would say to start with is because of the cyber threat, we took our SCADA system, which is responsible for the operations, safe operations of our systems. We took that off our corporate system, and we put it into what we call a DMZ zone, which means nobody can get access to it. So even if there is a breach somewhere on our system, it won't get into the pipeline safe operation. Every day, we have threats. We have a scoreboard where we see threats coming in real time. Because of the investments we have made, most of those are stopped before they become a real threat. However, if there is a threat, it is sequestered and then is studied by our team. And then we report that to the various authorities, the FBI and others, and we have briefings constantly with the federal partners to help us address this.
And Mr. Black, in your written testimony, you recommended the authorization of a voluntary information sharing program. In his confirmation hearing, PHMSA nominee Paul Roberti emphasized the importance of information sharing specifically on cybersecurity. Would you share with us more your perspective on that subject?
We have a great opportunity to do for pipelines what FAA has done to improve safety in aviation. In the 2016 pipeline reauthorization law, Congress said PHMSA should form a public advisory committee to come up with recommendations on how to develop this type of program. That work has been done, and it's ready for Congress to help authorize it. The benefit would be that pipeline operators, the safety advocates, and government could all talk about incidents and lessons in a safe space. So we're not concerned about antitrust violations. We're not concerned about that information getting out into the wrong hands. It's really been successful in aviation where pilots, machinists, anybody is able to get that information with the focus on improving pipeline safety. So if Congress can enact voluntary information sharing systems similar to what the advisory committee did, we will be able to do that type of a program that the NTSB and others will be cheering us on.
And I think it's important to explore something you just touched on, which is the concept of being able to share that kind of information in a safe space. Would you elaborate a little bit more on the types of things that can happen if we don't create an environment like that? For example, the information falling into the wrong hands and how that can exacerbate a vulnerability, or the other potential consequences you face if we don't have a clear framework for sharing that kind of risk or even breach or incident information.
So pipeline operators themselves maintain a lot of different programs for sharing information. We want to learn from an incident and get better across the entire industry. But there's a limitation right now in being able to have that discussion with government or to have the pipeline safety trust in the room. You want pipeline operators and anybody in the industry to be able to contribute that information and understand that that's going to be considered confidentially. It's not going to be misused against you in enforcement. There should be enforcement cases going on, but nothing in here should invoke that so that we can do safety. Right now, government isn't allowed to be a part of those discussions right now because they would have to put that information out on the street if asked. It's been successful in aviation. Let's do it for pipelines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York's 20th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our panelists. While I hope we can reach consensus on a bipartisan pipeline safety reauthorization, I have my doubts because recent history has shown that Republicans never miss an opportunity to promote fossil fuel industry interests. And we failed to reach agreement on a bipartisan bill last Congress, unlike our colleagues on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, because Republicans couldn't help themselves but to include extraneous provisions intended to promote oil and gas. And that dedication to fossil fuels led President Trump and congressional Republicans to end critical tax credits for fossil fuels' biggest competitors, renewables in the electricity sector and EVs in the transportation sector. This happened despite the fact that numerous independent analyses found that the Republicans' proposal will raise Americans' energy bills by more than $100 annually in the near term, growing to more than $400 within a decade. So during our last markup of energy bills, members of the majority continued to invoke the Keystone XL pipeline, suggesting that the Obama and Biden administrations killed jobs. But after the big ugly bill, it has become crystal clear who actually cares about American energy jobs. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the people who construct both renewable and pipeline projects. North America's building trades unions called the Republicans' Big Ugly Bill, and I quote, "the biggest job-killing bill in the history of this country." It is the equivalent of terminating more than 1,000 Keystone XL pipeline projects. So all of these years later, Republicans want to continue to relitigate Keystone while enacting a bill that will kill an estimated 1.75 million construction jobs, translating to $148 billion in lost annual wages and benefits for American workers. But, Mr. Karam, I want to try to highlight a couple of issues at PHMSA that may affect its ability to ensure safe operations of pipeline infrastructure. Your testimony noted that insufficient resources have resulted in PHMSA lacking technical capabilities, causing the agency to be overly reliant on regulated entities' technical expertise to carry out its responsibilities. This is an extremely troubling trend being implemented across many agencies by the Trump administration. Starving important life-saving regulatory agencies of skilled personnel and resources is a surefire way to allow corporate entities to cut corners at the expense of everyday Americans and our collective public interests. We're seeing this playbook be executed right now as the Trump administration works to eliminate EPA's Office of Research and Development and lay off hundreds of chemists, toxicologists, and other scientists. And that is because these public servants produce independent science that regulated industries often don't like. Polluters want their regulators to be toothless, to rely upon them for science, and to lack the capacity to verify industry, produce studies, or enforce rules. So, Mr. Karam, I think you might suggest that there has been an historic funding challenge at PHMSA, limiting its ability to be an effective independent safety regulator. But do you have a sense of whether things will get better or worse if Congress further reduces PHMSA funding authorization levels, as was proposed by committee Republicans just a few years ago?
Yes, I'd have to imagine they would get worse.
So I thank you for that. And I want to highlight another disturbing trend being advanced by the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress. Between the ongoing appropriations process and the Big Ugly Bill, federal budget cuts are pushing more and more costs onto state governments, which will require states to fill funding gaps or be forced to cut benefits and services. So, Mr. Karam, am I correct that states are partners in the effort to conduct inspections and oversight of pipelines?
Yes, the vast majority of the pipeline mileage in this country are under state jurisdiction for inspections and enforcement.
And if that commitment by the feds is reduced, what happens to the states?
Yes, state programs, as we've heard throughout this hearing, are in need of that funding. They can get up to 80% of their pipeline safety program reimbursed by federal funds through that state grant program, and historically they have not come close to that 80%.
So if states are unwilling or unable to cover more of the cost to be effective partners, will that make Americans more or less safe from potential pipeline risks?
I would imagine less safe.
Less safe. So not an outcome that we should all be working towards. So if we can avoid that, we should do our best to do so. With that, I thank you and yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio's 6th District for 5 minutes for questions.
I'm pretty loud, I'll just speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My attention will be directed at Andy Black. I hope you're doing well today. So thank you for your support in liquid energy. I really appreciate that. My district really much relies on it. So several points of focus of how safe pipelines could actually make the Ohio 6 a better place to live is we are now have a project of a cracker plant which will mimic the Monaca cracker plant, which is across the border in Pennsylvania. It's a $12.5 billion project. A lot of union jobs will be building that. It's very exciting. It's going to crack the gas into butane, propane, heavy gas, liquid gas, all kinds of exciting things. In the Ohio Senate, I was instrumental in building 3 gas power generated plants. It was a thrill of mine. We right now have about $40 billion worth of potential investors that are going to come to the Ohio 6, and we're going to build 6 or 7 more of these. And so what's going to happen is the Ohio Senate right now has Senate Bill 2, which is an energy bill, which is going to direct state money to coexist with federal money as a united force to developing energy. Data centers are coming up, AI advancement centers are coming up, and general manufacturing is coming all along the Ohio River. Pipelines support this industry and sometimes run through our neighborhoods, and they need to be safe. One of the most exciting things is the evolution of the pipelines that I have seen in my career and the development of what you call the smart pipeline, which I think most of the public is ignorant on. Smart pipeline actually allows for a safer progress of moving gas around through these neighborhoods. The liquid and gas pipeline advisory committees were created decades ago with the help of FEMSA on safety rulemaking and policy development. What is your personal perspective on the value of these advisory committees and their existence with safe pipelines?
Well, the project that you mentioned in Ohio and those in the Marcellus are great, wonderful examples to create jobs to benefit and to not have to take it all down to the Gulf Coast, right? So it's great for our country to have that flexibility. The advisory committees were created by Congress to make regulations better, right? Any proposal that PHMSA has needs to go to the gas or liquid or sometimes both, and that can make for a good exchange on helping people understand how a regulation should be modified to be more feasible, practical, economical. So it's good that we have those advisory committees, and we would look forward to future regulations going there.
I think that's really exciting. I think in making these committees even more strong is really what the exciting part is. Right now, these committees are meeting 4 times a year. In your personal opinion, do you think that needs to happen more frequently? And what better ways can we put to have guardrails inside these committees to have more safety, more rulemaking, more compliance to industry so the industry becomes a safer process?
I know some of my gas colleagues believe it's important to have a certain number of advisory committees. To me, quality is more important than quantity. Let's make sure those advisory committee members are up to speed, not just on regulation, but also on technological developments so that everybody understands what the latest possibilities are. That may take more meetings.
Do you think it's possible that we could take the political bent away from these advisory committees so it could be more of a bipartisan approach where everyone's voice could actually be represented in the committee and nobody would feel left out or threatened to be part of this process?
Yeah, they're constructed that way, and they should be. Yes, sir.
Well, I thank you so much for your thoughts on this. And with that, Chair, I yield my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields his time back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York's 14th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Karam, I want to touch on something that you mentioned in your written testimony, which is that pipeline safety law currently prevents the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, which we are discussing today, from imposing safety regulations on existing pipelines. And that was, frankly, shocking to me. It means that it will be a monumental task to make the existing 3.3 million miles of pipelines in our communities safer. Can you talk about how this requirement prevents us from making the most dangerous pipelines in America safer? And should we look at altering that requirement in any reauthorization of PHMSA?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The Pipeline Safety Act passed by Congress has a section in it, a provision, where it says that any design, construction, or initial testing standards adopted by PHMSA cannot apply to existing pipelines, only new and replaced pipelines. So, operational regulations and things like that can apply to existing pipelines, but those, initial testing, design, and construction standards cannot. And what that means in practice is that PHMSA has been unable to make certain life-saving regulatory changes, including those recommended by the NTSB after tragedies like San Bruno, like requiring rupture mitigation valves in high-consequence areas that we know would save lives. So in practice, this permanently exempts about half of the nation's pipelines from and including those at the highest risk from meeting critical modern safety standards.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karam. And as you mentioned, it's important to highlight something that you said. Half of pipelines in the U.S. are essentially blocked from having these additional safety standards for communities and workers on them and being updated to be safer. Ms. Miller, you represent an association of pipeline companies, and I see here in your testimony that it states that your members, quote, appreciate improved due process, unquote, for companies that violate the laws as a priority. I want to discuss the consequences for pipeline companies when they fail to follow the law and PHMSA's rules. Just over 5 years ago, an employee of Energy Transfer, a pipeline company and a member of your organization, was killed while conducting maintenance activities on a gas pipeline in Kansas. This employee was attempting to remove an object that had become stuck due to ice in a partly pressurized pipeline. Now, PHMSA's rules require operators to completely depressurize pipelines before working on them. But this worker was attempting to remove the object using a steel rod when the object became dislodged and, due to remaining pressure in the pipeline, struck him in the abdomen and killed him. Now Energy Transfer is in court, arguing that it should not be held to account for the fact that it did not follow PHMSA's rules. Mr. Chair, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a complaint brought by the Attorney General in the Northern District Court of Texas.
Without objection, so ordered.
This complaint states that, quote, PHMSA's investigation indicates that Energy Transfer failed to follow its manual of written procedures for conducting operations and maintenance activities at the Borchers Station in connection with this fatal incident. Someone died. Now, one of the biggest companies in the industry, Energy Transfer, is in court arguing that PHMSA shouldn't be able to hold any company that violates its rules responsible. Ms. Miller, you mentioned due process for companies that violate laws in your testimony as a priority. In your opinion, if a pipeline company does not follow the rules and a worker is killed, should PHMSA be able to hold that company responsible?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I would say that any specific questions about Energy Transfer's litigation, I would have to defer to them. But for our GPA midstream members, generally speaking, we do encourage that our members are able to rely on a strong enforcement protocol and that it is executed in a way that is transparent and complies with law, due process being part of that, to ensure that there are.
I apologize, I only have 15 seconds left. Should PHMSA be able to hold the companies responsible?
We do believe that PHMSA should be a strong enforcement agency and equitably apply its rules across the industry.
Okay, great. So they should be able to hold these companies responsible. And yet we are in an environment where the Trump administration and their enforcement actions against pipeline companies.
I'm sorry, the general lead time has expired.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, of course, also to our witnesses for coming. Again, you heard Colorado's 8th Congressional District. So we've got 80% of the oil, 50% of the natural gas in Colorado. That's from the hole in the ground through midstream, through we've got the only refinery in Colorado, and then final distribution to the end users. And so a lot of that obviously happens through pipelines. And we know, we've heard in the commentary today, pipelines, safest way to move this liquid energy around in terms of accidents. I want to make sure we also highlight the emissions. We had a incident in Colorado where some of that local distribution that relies on the pipelines went down during a really, really hard freeze. And so to backfill all of that energy that couldn't be transported via pipeline for a few months, it was thousands and thousands of trucks keeping the Denver metro area going in the dead of winter. We've talked obviously about the wear and tear that has on the roadway and traffic safety when you have that massive increase of vehicles. But I want to make sure that the emissions component of that isn't lost when we're talking about the climate and the fact that pipelines are, again, one of the lowest emission sources, ways of moving some of this energy around. They alleviate that critical demand on our electrical infrastructure because backfilling, in my area, all of the heat that comes from natural gas combustion, which is what heats a lot of homes in my area, backfilling that with electrical demand is incredibly difficult and challenging and costly to a lot of our consumers in Colorado. We've unfortunately seen a first in the nation mandated so-called beneficial electrification plan for a major utility in Colorado, mandating that even though they're not an electrical provider, they do natural gas distribution to customers, they have to have this so-called beneficial electrical plan, which is raising costs for consumers by dropping those heavy-handed mandates on consumers who want energy choice and want to be able to choose what works best for them, their family, and their budget. So my first question will be to Mr. Moriarty. Can you just talk a little bit about the impact to consumers and to consumers' pocketbooks from that utility perspective with the current program that we have of making sure that our pipelines are regulated, that, as we've heard, safest way to move this energy around. But can you talk a little bit about the impact to the customers if we were to take a different path and have more regulatory burden on pipelines?
Well, thank you for that question. All the costs that go in to delivering energy are recovered from our customers through state commission rate proceedings. One way that we've avoided higher costs is to construct LNG storage facilities to meet peak day demand. So you were talking about freeze-offs. We would have an LNG storage facility that would be available. We have one in Florida, as well as one now we're building on Delmarva.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then next question will be to Mr. Black. Obviously, pipeline safety, top of mind for everybody. We've talked a lot about it, and so I just want this to be our final thought for this hearing here. We need an empowered entity to step up and take action against bad actors that put the public safety at risk. And so that's why I was glad to see that PHMSA announced revisions to its pipeline safety enforcement actions last month to improve transparency and fairness. And so can you just comment on those changes, how they alter the enforcement dynamics for operators, and just talk a little bit about the evidentiary record process as well?
Congress has recognized there are failings in how PHMSA has managed its administrative enforcement program. In the 2020 Pipes Act, Congress mandated that PHMSA improve its procedures, including making the case file available to a respondent in a case. Then PHMSA, in the last administration, failed to do that. It happened episodically, sometimes not others, and it wasn't really codified in PHMSA's regulations. And so PHMSA has now, in the last month, as you say, improved that. It's a level playing field. That's all pipeline operators are asking for, due process when PHMSA exerts its administrative enforcement program, because pipeline operators know that PHMSA needs to be active and deter unsafe operations and give Congress and the American public confidence that they are on that case, making sure that we have a safe network.
Well, with our final 24 seconds, I guess I'll just close with, I think we've heard safety is top of mind in this space. We have that record of safety. We have that record of being responsible toward the climate, because this is one of the lowest emission ways to move energy around. It's cost effective for consumers, and then in my district, this provides high quality jobs for a high quality workforce that maintain these pipelines. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Right on the button. Thank you very much. Seeing no further members wishing to be recognized to ask questions to our witnesses, I want to thank you all for appearing before us for today. Members have additional written questions that may be for you, and I'll remind members that they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record. And I ask that the witness do their best to submit the response within 10 business days upon the receipt of the questions. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list, and without objection, that is so ordered. And again, I want to thank our witnesses, and Mr. Black, welcome back, having been a former staffer here on the committee. Also, this is the last hearing that we'll have in this room until it's, I guess we might say, worked on. We've had a little bit of issues in this room through the years. But we really appreciate you being here. Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.